Chapter 1759. The memories were like a tide, but not fierce, only warm. At this moment, Yi Xian understood everything about Qing'er and his childhood. At that time, Qing'er was just a naive little girl. Her life goal was to become a swordsman. All of this was because of one incident. Tendo was heartless. That time Tendo destroyed the world. And because of that Tendo destroyed the world, the fate of the little boy and the little girl were changed inside the mansion. After a long time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. His face was covered with tears. At this moment he remembered everything, including the incident in the cave. Yi Xian turned to look at the plain-dressed woman beside him. Qing'er. The plain-dressed woman held Yi Xian's hand, softly saying, "Brother." Yi Xian gently hugged Qing'er. The brother and sister held each other in silence. At this moment, in Yi Xian's arms, the plain-dressed woman's cheeks had 2 lines of clear liquid. At this moment, the big brother in front of her was the most complete. After a long time, Yi Xian and Qing'er sat in front of the mansion. Yi Xian looked at the horizon, softly saying, "Qing'er, it's time to go." Qing'er nodded. "If you don't want me to go, then I won't go." Yi Xian turned to look at Qing'er. "You found a new world, right?" Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked again, "That new world can interest you. It must be very strong, right?" Qing'er's expression was calm. "Just a little bit interested." "A little bit interested." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. A world that could pique the interest of Qing'er, his father, and his big brother was definitely not an ordinary world. Qing'er suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand and looked at Yi Xian. "If you don't want me to leave, I'll stay." Yi Xian didn't answer the question. Instead he asked, "Qing'er, the reason why you didn't fight with big brother and father was because of me, right?" Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked again, "If we really fight, are you confident?" Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "I'm invincible." Invincible. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. He knew that if he asked his big brother and old father, they would probably answer the same. As for who was stronger among the 3, they would only know after they fought. Yi Xian continued, "Qing'er, if you fight, it will be a fight to the death, right?" Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian continued, "The reason why old father and I didn't fight is because of me. In other words, I am still very weak in this vast universe, right?" Qing'er hesitated, then said, "Not that weak." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. His heart warmed. He finally realized it. Other than himself, everyone else was weak in Qing'er's eyes. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He leaned against the stone steps behind him and put his hands behind his head. "Qing'er, let's go." Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "If I follow old father, I will never be stronger than you." Qing'er was silent. Yi Xian stood up. He looked at the sunset in the distance and smiled. "Qing'er, I want to be stronger than you." Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "Why?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "As long as I become stronger than you, you won't fight each other, and you won't die." Qing'er was silent. Yi Xian turned to Qing'er and smiled. "Do you believe me?" Qing'er nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian laughed. This was the first time he'd aroused the thought of surpassing Qing'er and the others, because he knew that if he didn't, then the 3 of them might kill each other in the end. They were already invincible. Only a fight to the death could determine victory or defeat, or surpass themselves, unless the 3 of them met an even stronger opponent. If there was no stronger opponent, they would have to fight to the death. He didn't want to see that day. Qing'er suddenly said, "Don't force yourself. Even if you are not invincible, I will stay by your side and protect you forever." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "No, Qing'er, you shouldn't stop because of me." He grabbed Qing'er's hand. "I will work hard to become stronger and catch up to you." Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "It might be difficult." Yi Xian laughed. "It's okay. I think I can catch up." Xiaota said, "I have that halo." Xiaota was speechless. Qing'er blinked. "Halo?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. "It's that." "Oh right, it's the protagonist's halo." Qing'er opened her palm, and Little Pagoda appeared in her hand. Little Pagoda laughed awkwardly. "Big sister Tianming, I was just spouting nonsense." Tianming glanced at Xiaota, then looked at Yi Xian. "This Xiaota is not serious. Don't talk nonsense with him." Yi Xian was speechless. Xiaota was speechless. Qing'er returned Xiaota to Yi Xian. I will wait as long as it takes. Yi Xian smiled. I won't let you wait too long. Qing'er nodded. Okay. Yi Xian suddenly said. Qing'er, can I ask you some questions? Qing'er nodded. Okay. Yi Xian quickly asked. Qing'er, the sword that decides life and death is about killing intent, right? Qing'er nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said. That is to say, the stronger the killing intent, the more powerful it is, right? Qing'er shook her head. Only half of it. Yi Xian looked at Qing'er. What do you mean? Qing'er said. Killing intent is composed of two parts. The first is killing intent. When killing intent arises, there will be killing intent in the heart. The second part is killing intent. When killing intent and killing intent transform, it can condense intent. In other words, killing intent can be used to gather energy. Yi Xian said, the stronger the killing intent, the more powerful the sword is, right? Qing'er shook her head once more. It's the killing intent. The stronger the killing intent, the stronger the killing heart. The stronger the killing heart, the stronger the killing intent. The stronger the killing intent, the stronger the condensed killing force. The core is killing intent. As she spoke, she opened her palm. The walking sword appeared in her hand. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. Do you know how to make your killing intent stronger? Yi Xian said, killing people? Qing'er nodded. Killing one is a sin. Killing 10,000 is a hero. Killing 9 million is a hero among heroes. The more people you kill, the stronger your killing intent. Yi Xian said. Qing'er, to what extent can your killing intent reach? Qing'er said, limitless. Yi Xian was stunned. Limitless. Qing'er nodded. As long as I want to, I can slaughter tens of thousands of universes with a single thought. Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian, Xiaota hid back into the prison pagoda. This elder sister Tianming is too dangerous. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. Now is the heaven ascension boundary. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Qing'er gently waved her hand. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of time-dimensional rivers appeared around them. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was dumbfounded, because he discovered that these time-dimensional rivers were Qing'er's own time-dimensional rivers, not of the world. Before this, he had only seen 8 or 9 of them condense at most. Qing'er could condense hundreds of thousands of time-dimensional rivers. This was too exaggerated. Exaggerated to the point of being abnormal. Qing'er suddenly said, it can be more. Yi Xian said, how much more is more? Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. Limitless. Limitless. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Qing'er said, any realm can be limitless. Yi Xian said, in other words, a realm can be cultivated for a lifetime? Qing'er nodded. You can say that, but when you reach limitless, this limitless is meaningless. So at that time, you can go to the next realm. Yi Xian was puzzled. Reach limitless? Qing'er nodded. Right now I am in the heaven ascension boundary. The heaven ascension boundary can condense the time dimension, and I can condense the time dimension infinitely. In this case, I have reached limitless, so this realm has no meaning for me. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Qing'er, besides, is there anyone else who can achieve limitless within a realm? Qing'er shook her head. I have never seen it. Yi Xian frowned. Not even the creator of this realm? Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. The creator of this heaven ascension realm is not even 1 in a million of me. As she spoke, her beautiful brows knit together slightly, and she said, wait, how can this person compare to me? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He was completely dumbfounded. Qing'er had surpassed the creator of this realm. How terrifying was that? At this time Qing'er said, this realm itself has many flaws. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, flaws? Qing'er nodded. The first flaw is that people can condense the time dimension, but people do not have a thorough understanding of this so-called time dimension. That is the essence. Many people can be said to know nothing about the essence of time and space-time. Without understanding the essence of time and space-time, even if they condense the time dimension, it is just a superficial appearance, a showy appearance. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Qing'er, what is the essence of time and space-time? Qing'er said, time and space-time is the continuation of space, and space is limitless and eternal. What is limitless and eternal? In the current universe, it can be understood that space has no boundaries and will exist forever. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Can't we erase space?" Qing'er waved her lily-white hand, and the space to her right was erased. She pointed to the erased place. "What is this place now?" Yi Xian hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know," Qing'er said. "It is still space, but this is a destroyed space. But its essence is still space. So, under the current universe's rules, space will exist forever." Yi Xian looked at Qing'er. "Under the current universe's rules," Qing'er means? And outside the current universe? Qing'er was silent. Yi Xian asked softly, "What is it?" Qing'er said, "Brother, let's talk about things within the current universe's rules. If we talk about other things, they may not understand. But if I explain, they may ask 100,000 why." Yi Xian. Chapter 1760. Yi Xian was a little embarrassed. He knew that the difference between him and Qing'er was too great. Qing'er suddenly said softly, "Take it slow." Actually, it was only Yi Xian. If it was anyone else, she wouldn't even say a word. Asking her to discuss such a low-level thing? Was she tired of living? Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Then Qing'er, "Let's talk about this space." Qing'er thought for a moment, then opened her palm. A time dimension suddenly appeared in her hand. "Can you see what's different about it?" Yi Xian looked at the time dimension, then said in a low voice, "I can see it. But I still want to hear it from you, Qing." Qing'er rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. "Naughty." Yi Xian laughed. Inside the world prison pagoda, Xiao Ta sighed. In this world, only Yi Xian dared to be naughty in front of big sister Qing'er. If anyone else dared to say a word of nonsense, big sister Qing'er would directly say, "Where is your home?" Qing'er explained, "Space is limitless and eternal. If you look closely, you'll find that the time dimension in my hand is limitless." As she spoke, she released her right hand. In an instant, the time dimension grew larger and larger. In the end, it covered the entire world, including the endless galaxy. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "As long as I want, my time dimension can cover the entire universe." Yi Xian was silent. They were both at the heaven ascension stage, but the difference was too great. Yi Xian asked again, "Qing'er, what about the mortal severing stage?" "Mortal severing?" Qing'er opened her palm. The time dimension in the surrounding world directly condensed into a sword. Yi Xian's face was full of shock. "This is?" Qing'er said. "Zhu Chen's method is to materialize the dimension of time. In other words, he's changing the dimension of time. To be able to reach this level, it means that he has truly grasped the essence of time and space-time." As she spoke, she paused for a moment before continuing. "If you can grasp the essence of time and space, not only will you reach the infinite realm, but you will also reach the mortal realm." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before asking, "How do I master the essence of space-time and time?" Qing'er said nothing. Yi Xian said solemnly, "It's very difficult, right?" Qing'er shook her head. "It's not difficult. However, it will take some time." Yi Xian quickly asked, "How long?" Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "It depends on your talent." Yi Xian asked again, "If it were me, how long would it take?" Qing'er wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er said, "I was wrong. It doesn't depend on talent, it depends on one's foundation. Bro, your foundation isn't particularly good. So if you want to understand the essence of space-time and time, you'll have to start from scratch." Yi Xian said solemnly, "That means it'll take a long time, right?" Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked softly, "How long?" Qing'er suddenly opened her palm, and Xiao Ta, who was in Yi Xian's body, fell into her palm. Looking at Xiao Ta, Qing'er's right hand tightened slightly. Boom! Xiao Ta trembled violently. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "This?" Xiao Ta also hurriedly said, "Young master, save me." Yi Xian looked at Qing'er, and was about to speak, when the world around them suddenly became illusory. Qing'er waved her sleeves, and the world returned to normal. Yi Xian was confused, not knowing what had happened. Qing'er suddenly handed Xiao Ta to Yi Xian. "I've modified it. Now the world inside is different from the world outside." Yi Xian blinked. "Different?" Qing'er nodded. 10 years of cultivation inside is equivalent to 1 day outside. Yi Xian was shocked. 10 years of cultivation inside is equivalent to 1 day outside. Qing'er nodded. I could have reversed more time, but this pagoda couldn't withstand my power, so I could only reverse it to this extent. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta and said, that means the world inside Xiao Ta is different from the world outside. Qing'er said, only the flow of time is different. I've reversed the flow of time inside. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Qing'er thought for a while and said, I'll accompany you for a few more days. I'll guide you in your cultivation. Yi Xian hastily said, okay. What he needed the most now was a good teacher. And Qing'er was undoubtedly the most suitable one, because he had learned Qing'er's swordsmanship and swordsmanship. So Qing'er was the most suitable person to teach him. Qing'er suddenly said, I'll make a sword for you. Yi Xian blinked. Make a sword. Qing'er nodded. You need a sword that suits you. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword spirit appeared in his hand. My father gave this to me. Qing'er looked at the sword spirit and shook her head. This sword suits him, but not you. Moreover, although this sword is for you to use, it doesn't recognize you as its master. So it's better if you don't want it. With that, she flicked her sleeves. The sword spirit was sent away by a ray of sword light. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er said, I sent her back to her master. Then, she pulled Yi Xian's hand and walked out. Yi Xian said, Qing'er, what sword do you want to make for me? Qing'er said, a sword that suits you. Yi Xian was curious. Qing'er, didn't you say that a powerful swordsman can use any sword? If you make a sword that's too strong for me, will it affect my swordsmanship? Qing'er said, it won't. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Qing'er said, it's weak anyway. It won't affect me. Then she regretted it. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er hesitated and said, you're actually quite strong. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Qing'er, you don't have to comfort me. I know there's still a gap between me and you. A gap? Qing'er was speechless. Xiao Ta suddenly said, young master, you're the first to make Sister Tianming speechless. I'm afraid you're the last. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Qing'er disappeared with Yi Xian. When they showed up again, the brother and sister were already in a boundless starry sky. The plain-dressed woman led Yi Xian into the depths of the starry sky. Don't worry about the sword's grade. The so-called common sword and divine sword are both within the realm. As long as they are within the realm, what's the difference between common and divine swords? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, that so-called everything can be used as a sword. The plain-dressed woman said, it's also a realm. However, it's a realm outside the realm. As she spoke, she opened her palm, and a wooden sword appeared in her hand. The woman in the plain dress looked at Yi Xian. This sword is a divine sword in my hand. Yi Xian said in a low voice. The sword is extraordinary because of the person, right? The plain-dressed woman nodded. You can make the sword extraordinary now. However, there's a limit to it. If you meet someone stronger than you, can you fight with a wooden sword? Yi Xian shook his head. If he used a wooden sword, he wouldn't be able to fight. Because whether he used a sword to decide life and death, or drew a sword to decide life and death, he had extremely high requirements for the sword. The plain-dressed woman said, so you don't have to stick to the common sword and divine sword. It doesn't matter what sword it is, as long as you don't rely on it. As for relying, you've subdued your heart and won't make such a low-level mistake. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. As he spoke, he looked at Qing'er. Qing'er, what sword are you going to make for me? Qing'er stopped moving and said, a special sword, and it's a sword that only you can utilize. As she spoke, she glanced at the starry sky in front of her and said, let's start with space-time. As she spoke, she opened her palm and swiped it lightly in front of her. With this swipe, the space in front of them started to disintegrate bit by bit. Needless to say, Yi Xian was slightly stunned at this moment. The space in front of him was disintegrating. This disintegration wasn't destruction. It was changing the structure of space. Qing'er was changing space. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said in a trembling voice, young lord, she's changing the rules. Yi Xian said in a low voice in his heart, changing the rules? Xiaota said in horror. Yes. She's changing the rules of this universe. Yi Xian looked at Qing Er in front of him with a complicated look in his eyes. Just how strong was this Qing Er? Was he bragging when he said he would surpass her? Yuan Realm. On this day, an old man suddenly came to Yuan Realm. On the old man's chest, there were two big black words, Sky Demon. Sky Demon Nation. Beside the old man was Na and Mu. Yumu was silent. No one knew what they were thinking. At this moment, a man in black clothes suddenly appeared in front of them. The man in black clothes looked at the old man and smiled. So it's the third Demon King of Sky Demon Nation. The third Demon King looked at the man in black clothes. Small grotto heaven Li Xianqing. He's said to be invincible in the space-time realm. Li Xianqing smiled. You flatter me. The third Demon King suddenly turned his head. Since the people from the ancient world are here, why don't you come out and meet us? As soon as he said that, the space to the right of the third Demon King suddenly split open. The next moment, a woman slowly walked out. The woman wore a white dress and a white bamboo hat. Her face was covered with a veil, and she held a 3-foot-long curved blade in her hand. Seeing the woman, the third Demon King frowned. You're Blade Lady Mo from the ancient world. Blade Lady Mo. Hearing this name, Li Xianqing squinted his eyes. He looked at the woman in white clothes, and a trace of battle intent flashed in his eyes. Blade Lady Mo looked down. That god-level spring of eternal life is in Yi Xian's hands. The third Demon King said. That youth is with that mysterious woman. If we want to get the spring of eternal life, we have to kill that woman first. Kill the woman in white clothes first. Hearing the third Demon King's words, Yumu slowly closed his eyes. She tried to persuade them, but no one listened. Her master was in the Sky Demon Kingdom. Even if her master was in the Sky Demon Kingdom, his words wouldn't carry much weight, let alone her. At this moment, the third Demon King suddenly looked at Yumu. She can kill a space-time realm? Yumu nodded. The third Demon King nodded and didn't say anything. At this moment, Li Xianqing smiled and said, killing someone of the same level, isn't that simple? Blade Lady Mo also said, it's very simple. The third Demon King suddenly said, let's join forces to kill this woman first. Then we'll talk about the ownership of the spring of eternal life. Is there a problem? Li Xianqing shrugged. No problem. Blade Lady Mo looked at the third Demon King and raised her eyebrows. She said proudly, is there a need to join forces? P.S. Zongheng stage. Come if you have tickets. Quick, 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 quick. Chapter 1761. Yumu sighed softly. She didn't say anything, because she knew that it would be useless no matter what she said. Moreover, she would even offend someone. How strong was the woman in a simple dress? She didn't know. She really didn't know. She was at the space-time realm as well. But she couldn't sense the woman's true strength, because she killed with a single strike of her sword. However, she knew that the three people by her side weren't simple as well. All three of them were peak space-time realm experts. And they weren't ordinary peak space-time realm experts. The three of them could instantly kill space-time realm experts of the same level. As for mortal severing realm experts, they were like ants before the three of them. However, she knew that the three of them were absolutely not as strong as the woman in a simple dress. Only when they faced the woman in a simple dress would they realize how terrifying she was. Meanwhile, the third Demon King suddenly said, I know that you're invincible amongst your peers. But this woman's strength is probably extraordinary as well. It's best not to underestimate her. Li Xianqing glanced at the third Demon King and smiled. I can kill her if she isn't a Saint Ascension realm expert. The Saint Ascension realm. The third Demon King nodded slightly. There's no aura of a saint here. I presume she isn't a Saint Ascension realm expert. However, we still can't underestimate her. It's better to be safe than sorry. Li Xianqing roared with laughter. I can kill anyone below the minor saint realm. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Bladeswoman Mo turned around and disappeared as well. The third Demon King's expression was calm, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yumu glanced at the third Demon King and said, the third Demon King is provoking them on purpose. The third Demon King glanced at Yumu and smiled. That little girl isn't simple at all. Yimu fell silent. The third demon king spoke softly. She's very strong, right? Yimu immediately nodded. The third demon king smiled. In your opinion, is she stronger or am I? Yimu was slightly hesitant. The third demon king said, looks like she's stronger. Yimu spoke solemnly. Her strength is a mystery. As she spoke, she gazed at the third demon king. The third demon king didn't tell them about Elder Lin Mu being instantly killed because, at this point, she didn't say anything else. The third demon king smiled. What a smart girl. Hearing this, Yimu's face darkened. The third demon king said softly, there is always someone better than you out there. Although the godly spring of eternal life is tempting, if the other party is too strong, our Sky Demon Kingdom will naturally give it up. However, I have to see exactly how strong this woman is. Yimu looked at the three demon kings. The three demon kings want to use the two of them to test her? The third goblin king nodded. If she can even kill those two instantly then. At this point he glanced at Yimu. Lass, it's not that we don't believe him. It was just that he was still unable to come into contact with certain levels, so some of his judgments might be wrong. Therefore, I need to test this woman's true strength. If she's just an ordinary peak spacetime realm expert, then we'll have to take revenge. If she can even kill those two, then our Sky Demon Kingdom will have to suffer this loss even if we don't want to. Yimu nodded slightly. I understand. If she was just an ordinary peak spacetime realm powerhouse. Third Monster King laughed. I want to kill him. I want the spring of eternal life too. The news of the godly spring of eternal life appearing in the primordial realm spread quickly. For a time, other than the ancient realm, Sky Demon Kingdom, and the small cave, beyond the heavens, countless mysterious powerhouses entered the primordial realm. However, after knowing that the godly spring of eternal life was with Yi Xian, those mysterious powerhouses immediately left the primordial realm to search for Yi Xian. Yi Clan. In the main hall, the powerhouses of the Yi Clan were all present. At this moment, everyone's expression was extremely solemn, because too many powerhouses had come during this period of time, all for the godly spring of eternal life. At this moment, an elder in the hall suddenly said, fortunately, the elder gave the godly spring of eternal life to young Master Yi Xian, or else our Yi Clan would be in danger. In the hall, everyone nodded. If the godly spring of eternal life was still there, then the Yi Clan would definitely be attacked by a group of powerhouses. On the main seat, Yi Yuan said softly, I wonder if young Master Yi can hold on. He was actually quite worried because the strength of the powerhouses that had come had far exceeded his expectations. Meanwhile, a black-clothed old man suddenly appeared in the hall, and he spoke in a low voice. Patriarch, I've received news that those mysterious powerhouses are madly searching for young Master Yi Xian. Yi Yuan's face instantly sank when he heard this. An elder suddenly said, do you need our help? Yi Yuan shook his head. There's no need for us to do anything with Senior Su Chang here. If that senior can't stop them, then we'll only be giving our lives away. As he spoke, a wisp of worry flashed through his eyes as he looked out of the hall. I hope the young master is safe. Meanwhile, Yi He spoke abruptly. I think we shouldn't worry about the young master. Everyone looked at Yi He, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, I think that Senior Su Chang's temper isn't particularly good. If these people offend her, then wouldn't she destroy our universe if she gets angry? Everyone was speechless. In the starry sky, the expanse of starry sky in front of her started to break down bit by bit under her control, and then it converged in front of her. Yi Xian gazed at her. Needless to say, he was beyond shocked right now. What sort of divine ability is this? The space in front of Qing, wasn't vanishing. It was being reconstructed instead. This had exceeded the scope of his understanding. Suddenly, the hilt of a sword appeared in front of Qing. Yi Xian hurriedly walked over to Qing. Only the hilt. Qing glanced at the sword hilt, and then she said, this space is only suitable to be a sword hilt. Yi Xian blinked. The hilt is suitable? Qing nodded. Come, let's go make the hilt. As she spoke, she took Yi Xian's hand and vanished on the spot. It didn't take long for Yi Xian and the woman to arrive in a temporal dimension. However, the temporal dimension here wasn't quite the same as the one Yi Xian had seen in the past. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. Qing the temporal dimension here. Qing suddenly said, "The river of time is the main vein of this universe." Yi Xian frowned slightly. The main vein? Qing nodded. Every universe has a main vein of time, and it records the beginning and end of the universe. Very few people are able to come into contact with this main vein. She glanced at the surroundings as she spoke, and then said, "We're standing in the present. If we move forward, we'll return to the past, and if we move forward, we'll arrive at the future." To the future. Yi Xian hurriedly looked ahead, and he noticed that there were almost a few 100,000 Xiao Dao in front of him. Yi Xian gazed at Qing. Qing spoke softly, "The future is uncertain. Every move we make will result in a different outcome. So the future is unknown and uncertain." Yi Xian spoke solemnly, "Can Qing predict the future?" Qing glanced at Yi Xian. "I can if I want to." Yi Xian blinked. "Then do you want to?" Qing shook her head. Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Qing pointed forward and said, "I can change any future if I want to. I can even erase the future." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he smiled bitterly. He finally understood. Invincible. Qing was invincible. She was invincible, almost omnipotent. Yi Xian suddenly sighed. As Xiaota said, an existence like Qing should not exist in this world. At this time, Xiaota's face changed. He hurriedly said, "Young master, don't talk nonsense. I have never said such words. I swear on my master. No, I swear on my tower. I have never said such words." Yi Xian curled his lips. Qing's temper is so good. Why is Xiaota so nervous? Xiaota was confused. Good temper? Good temper? Xiaota was silent. This young master has started not to speak human language. Qing glanced at Yi Xian. The corner of her mouth raised slightly. Yi Xian smiled. "Qing, your smile is so beautiful." Qing nodded softly said, "I only smile for you to see." Yi Xian laughed. He grabbed Qing's hand. "I think I am the happiest person in the world." Inside Yi Xian, Xiaota sighed. He found that the plain-dressed woman gave all her good things to Yi Xian. She was also the person who doted on Yi Xian the most in the world. As long as Yi Xian willed it, she would not hesitate to destroy the entire universe. Qing grabbed Yi Xian's hand. She looked at Yi Xian. "I will forge the sword for you." With that, she turned around and flicked her sleeve. Boom! All of a sudden, the river of time in the surrounding main vein began to boil like boiling water. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Yi Xian's face fell. "Qing, what will happen if this main river of time is destroyed?" Qing looked at Yi Xian. "If the universe collapses, all life will cease to exist." Yi Xian blinked. "Don't tell me you want to use this main river of time to forge the sword for me?" Qing said, "I don't think there's a problem, but perhaps you don't want me to destroy this universe, right?" Yi Xian nodded quickly. Yes. Although he wasn't a good person, he wouldn't be able to wipe out all living beings in this universe just because of a single thought of his. After all, there were countless living beings in this universe. Furthermore, there were many of his friends and family. Qing nodded. "I will not erase this universe. I will absorb the power of time in this main river of time." With that, she looked at Yi Xian. "I want to forge a sword with space-time as the hilt, time as the blade, and the nomological principles as the tip. This sword can only be used by me." Hearing this, Yi Xian felt his blood boiling. From Qing's words, this sword was definitely not an ordinary one. In Yi Xian's body, Xiaota was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "It's over. The little lord has risen. Next, the act-tough king will appear in the world." Chapter 1762. Needless to say, Yi Xian's blood was boiling at this moment. A sword forged by Qing. He was looking forward to it even more. From all around, the power of time converged on Qing. She was extracting the power of time from the entire universe, including the past, present, and future. Truth be told, Yi Xian didn't quite understand what this meant. If a top-notch expert was here, he or she would be shocked. Extracting the power of time from the present was not particularly difficult. But extracting the power of time from the past was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Extracting the power of time from the future was even more difficult. Theoretically speaking, extracting the power of time from the future was an impossible task, because the future was uncertain. But Qing did it. No one knew how she did it. If Yi Xian asked, she would definitely tell him, but Yi Xian didn't think about it at all. Gradually, a sword condensed into form in front of Qing. The sword was white, hard to notice if one didn't look closely. It was 3 feet long and 2 fingers wide. From the surface, the sword looked simple and unadorned. Time was the sword's body. At this time, the sword was completely formed. Qing flicked her sleeves, and the power of the world dispersed. Qing opened her palm, and the sword appeared in her palm. She looked at the sword in her hand, her expression calm. It's a bit lacking. If I condensed it directly from this universe's main time vein, it would be better. Yi Xian sweated. Sometimes Qing's way of thinking was really dangerous. Condensing it from this universe's main time vein was equivalent to erasing this universe. At this time Qing suddenly combined the hilt with the sword. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian felt the surroundings boil. Qing gently waved her hand, and everything returned to normal. Qing looked at the sword in her hand, and it trembled slightly. Yi Xian walked to Qing's side and looked at the sword. Qing, this sword is special, right? Qing nodded. To you it's special. Yi Xian was speechless. He felt like he had been hurt many times. Qing continued. We're still missing the sword point and sword soul. With that, she disappeared with Yi Xian. When the siblings reappeared, they were already in a boundless starry sky. Qing slowly closed her eyes. Yi Xian glanced at Qing, not daring to disturb Qing. Right at this moment, the starry sky above Qing suddenly started trembling violently. In the next moment, a strand of extremely terrifying pressure swept down from that expanse of space. And then the entire starry sky started seething with excitement. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. At this moment, he actually had a feeling of suffocation. Invincible. This was what he was feeling at the moment. The owner of this pressure was too terrifying. Apart from Qing's group of 3, this was the most terrifying pressure he had ever encountered. Just the pressure alone was enough to make him despair. Whose pressure was this? Xiaota suddenly said. Young lord, don't panic. With Sister Tianming here, no one can act tough. It paused for a moment then added. Except for you, Yi Xian. Just then, a shadow quietly formed above Qing's head. Yi Xian looked at the shadow. It was like a shadow, he couldn't see it clearly. But judging from the appearance, it seemed to be a woman. The shadow looked at the woman in the plain dress, its voice indifferent. How can you sense me? The woman in the plain dress shook her head. I don't like your tone. With that, she flicked her sleeves. With the sound of a sword ringing, a ray of sword light pressed against the shadow's forehead. Yi Xian's face turned solemn, because he found that the shadow's hand had grabbed the sword light. Block Qing's sword? At this moment, the sword light pierced through the shadow's forehead without warning. Boom! In an instant, the shadow seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Its whole body trembled violently, and then became illusory. The shadow said in astonishment. You! The woman in the plain dress walked in front of the shadow. I want to borrow some power of law from you. Is there a problem? The shadow hurriedly shook its head. No problem. Its voice was trembling. She confirmed that she couldn't beat this person. The woman in the plain dress nodded. I need to use your power of law to condense the tip of my sword. Remember, I want your power of law. After a moment of silence, the shadow opened its palm. In an instant, countless power of law gathered in its palm. Yi Xian walked to Qing's side. Qing, who is she? Qing said. The spirit of the supreme law of this universe. She can be considered to be a core existence of the current universe. As for her strength, she can be said to be one of the peak existences in the current universe. Yi Xian's heart shook when he heard this. No wonder a single pressure from her was so difficult to endure. Moreover, that pressure wasn't targeted at him. If it was targeted at him, then he wouldn't be able to fight back at all. This is the supreme law of this current universe. She's a real big shot. At this moment, the supreme law suddenly looked at Qing'er. You've jumped out of that circle. Qing'er glanced at the supreme law. Which circle are you talking about? The supreme law was speechless. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he asked, Qing'er, are there many circles? Qing'er nodded. Many. I don't know which one she's talking about. Yi Xian was speechless. The supreme law said in a low voice, the current circle of laws. Qing'er glanced at the supreme law. It jumped out hundreds of thousands of years ago. The supreme law's expression froze. After a moment of silence, she asked again, how did it jump out? Qing'er said, let's not discuss such a low-level question. The supreme law was speechless. Within Yi Xian's body, Xiao Ta sighed softly. Sigh, supreme law big shot. Do you think you're the young master? It knew that heaven's mandate would only answer Yi Xian's questions and patiently explain them. If others asked her a question, then she'd be merciful if she didn't stab them with her sword. The supreme law hesitated for a moment, but it didn't dare to continue asking, because it realized that the woman in front of it was already slightly impatient. At this moment, Qing'er suddenly opened her palm. In an instant, the power of countless supreme laws started to gather in her palm. Gradually a sword tip was formed. Yi Xian said softly, Qing'er, does this sword tip formed from the supreme law have any special effects? Qing'er said, it can slash through all laws. As she spoke, she glanced at the supreme law and said, apart from her. The supreme law didn't say anything. It was formed from her power of laws, so it naturally couldn't slash through her. However, apart from her, it could slash through all laws in this universe. At this moment, the sword tip in Qing'er's hand suddenly finished forming, and she directly fused it with the hilt and blade. Bang! A powerful sword aura swept out from the sword. In an instant, the starry sky and the surroundings started to seethe once more. And then it was gradually destroyed. The sword tip was formed. At this moment, Qing'er pressed her fingers together and flicked the sword lightly, and it instantly calmed down. Qing'er glanced at the sword in her hand and said, only the sword soul is left. As she spoke, she glanced at the supreme law before her. The supreme law's expression changed drastically. Don't tell me she wants me to be the sword soul? Yi Xian's eyelids twitched as well. Don't tell me Qing'er really wants this supreme law to be the sword soul? Meanwhile, Qing'er suddenly opened her palm, and then a sword flew out from within Yi Xian's body. The soul-suppressing sword. Qing'er sized it up and said, the sword soul needs to acknowledge you as its master, and it needs to be connected to your heart. Only then will you be able to truly control a sword. As she spoke, she gazed at the soul-suppressing sword in her hand. This sword soul is very suitable. However, its cultivation is too low right now, so I have to improve it. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the sword soul with her finger. Bang! In an instant, the soul-suppressing sword started to tremble violently. It was forcefully improving it. The soul-suppressing sword's aura grew stronger and stronger. In the end, its aura actually caused Yi Xian to feel a certain amount of pressure. Meanwhile, Qing'er withdrew her hand and gazed at the soul-suppressing sword. I've given her new life. She can devour any soul now, so you'll have to constantly feed her from now on. The more you feed her, the stronger she'll become. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Feed what? Qing'er replied, souls. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er directly fused the soul-suppressing sword with the sword in her hand. Bang! A sword howl suddenly shot into the sky, and shot deep into the starry sky. At this moment, countless stellar regions heard this sword howl. A dark-clothed man suddenly stopped moving in an unknown part of the starry sky. It was Li Xianqing from the minor abode. Li Xianqing turned around and looked towards the distance, and then the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Found it. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. In another part of the boundless starry sky, Lady Emo suddenly stopped moving as well. A moment later, she turned around and slashed, causing the space in front of her to be torn open. After that, she stepped into the torn space and started to travel through space. In the starry sky, the plainly dressed woman handed the sword in her hand to Yi Xian. It's yours. Yi Xian took the sword. As he held it, he immediately felt Little Soul's presence. At this moment, he felt as if he and the sword were one. Clearly this was because of Little Soul. Yi Xian looked at Qing'er. "Qing'er, what's so special about this sword?" Qing'er said, "Spacetime is the hilt, and spacetime is the sword. With this sword, you can travel to any spacetime, and not be restricted by any spacetime. Not only that, but with a thought, the sword can appear in any spacetime." Yi Xian shifted his consciousness. In an instant, the sword in his hand appeared in the undead Imperial clan, which was countless galaxies away. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He had just been thinking about it, but he never expected that the sword would appear in the Undying Emperor clan. That wasn't the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that he could feel everything in the Undying Emperor clan through the sword. It was as if he himself was in the Undying Emperor clan. At this time, Qing'er said, "You can use this sword to travel freely through the space-time of the myriad worlds. All space-time restrictions have no effect on you. You can reach the Undying Emperor clan in an instant." Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword appeared in his hand. Looking at the sword, Yi Xian fell silent. Originally, space-time had its restrictions and resistance. But now that he had this sword, space-time had no restrictions or resistance. He could travel through the myriad worlds with a thought. Of course, he was thinking about why Qing'er could kill people in a second. There was only one word to describe it: fast. He could do it very fast now. Of course, compared to Qing'er, he was far inferior. But compared to others? Qing'er said, "As for the power of time." At this point she frowned and turned to look. Not far away, a man in black clothes was slowly walking over. Li Xuanyi, invincible in the space-time realm. After Li Xuanyi appeared, he looked at the Supreme Law and smiled. "So there is someone faster than me. Sir, are you also here to kill this woman?" Hearing this, the Supreme Law's expression changed. She stared at Li Xuanyi. "Don't speak nonsense, or I will exterminate your entire clan. P.S. The weather has been getting colder and colder. Everyone please keep warm. Especially those with children at home. My son has caught a cold. He's been crying in the middle of the night every day. He's about to collapse. Everyone please keep warm, and remind your family to keep warm." Chapter 1763. Kill this woman? The Supreme Law almost went berserk. Where did this idiot come from? Sure, show off, but don't drag me into it. I can't even hide in time. Li Xianqing frowned slightly. "I'm not here to kill her." The Supreme Law turned to look at the plain-dressed woman. "I don't know him." His desire to live was very strong. The plain-dressed woman looked at Li Xianqing without saying a word. Li Xuanqing's gaze also landed on the plain-dressed woman. When he saw her, he frowned slightly. Something was wrong. At this moment he felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Is she from the Sky Demon Nation?" Upon hearing Yi Xian's words, Li Xianqing smiled and said, "I'm Li Xianqing of the Small Grotto Heaven." Small Grotto Heaven? Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Li Xianqing? I've never heard of you." Li Xianqing laughed. "Isn't it normal that you've never heard of me when you're in the lowest level of this universe?" Yi Xian. At this moment the Supreme Law suddenly said, "She's from the Small Grotto Heaven." Li Xianqing looked at the Supreme Law with a hint of seriousness in his eyes. "Who is it?" At this moment, he suddenly realized that this Supreme Law was very dangerous. After a moment of silence, the Supreme Law said, "Chen Dongxian is the ancestral master, right?" Li Xianqing narrowed his eyes. "Who is it?" The Supreme Law looked at Li Xianqing coldly. Ancestral Master Chen Dongxian is someone after all. Why is there such an idiot among his descendants? Li Xuanqing's eyes gradually turned cold. "How dare you humiliate me?" The Supreme Law was expressionless. "Humiliate? You don't have that right." Li Xuanqing's lips curled into a sinister smile. Arrogant. As he spoke, he flicked his sleeves, and a powerful force swept toward the Supreme Law. However, that powerful force disappeared without a trace as soon as it reached the Supreme Law. Li Xianqing was stunned at the sight of this. Arrogant. The Supreme Law looked at Li Xianqing coldly. "Even if the ancestral master sees me, he has to kowtow obediently." Li Xianqing was so angry that he laughed. What a joke! As he spoke, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, he appeared directly above the Supreme Law's head. Then he stomped his foot down. Heaven and earth trampling. As soon as he finished speaking, a gigantic footprint, that was 1,000 feet long, came crashing down from the top of the Supreme Law's head. Boom! In an instant, the entire starry sky became illusory. Right at this moment, the huge footprint vanished without a trace, and the Supreme Law didn't even budge an inch. In the air, Li Xuanqing's face was filled with disbelief. At this moment, the Supreme Law opened its palm. Imprison. As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Li Xuanqing transformed into a bloody cage. Seeing this, Li Xuanqing's expression instantly changed. The laws of heaven and earth, it's the legendary Supreme Laws. Supreme Laws. Li Xuanqing's entire body was trembling. What kind of existence was a Supreme Law? That was the existence of the ceiling of this current universe. Even the patriarch of the small grotto heaven was as weak as an ant in front of her. Let alone him. Why was this Supreme Law here? The Supreme Law was about to speak. But at this moment, the woman in a plain dress suddenly spoke. He seems to be looking for me. Hearing this, the Supreme Law's expression instantly changed, and she hurriedly bowed. Senior, such a person isn't worthy of your attention at all. Seeing the Supreme Law address the woman in a plain dress as Senior, Li Xuanqing's face was filled with astonishment. Senior? The Supreme Law was so respectful to this woman? The woman in a plain dress glanced at Li Xuanqing. His target seems to be me. Li Xuanqing stared fixedly at the woman in a plain dress. Who is it? The woman in a plain dress shook her head. Why do you all like to ask such boring questions? As she spoke, she looked at the Supreme Law. Do you know where that small grotto heaven is? The Supreme Law nodded. The woman in a plain dress said, Point me in a direction. Yi Xian was speechless. The Supreme Law hesitated for a moment, and then pointed to the right. The woman in a plain dress opened her palm, and a sword appeared in her hand. She was just about to attack when she seemed to have thought of something, and her brows furrowed. A short moment later, she turned to look at Yi Xian. I need some opponents to temper myself. Are you confident? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he turned to look at the Supreme Law. Is this small grotto heaven very strong? The Supreme Law glanced at Yi Xian. It's not especially strong. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he smiled. I'm confident. Within the World Prism Pagoda, Xiao Ta sighed softly in his heart. Young lord, this idiot has confidence my ass. That person before us is the ceiling of the current universe. Is his being weak the same as his being weak? The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly when she heard Yi Xian. Then I'll deal with him myself. As she spoke, she looked at Li Xuanqing. The latter said fiercely, Who exactly is it? The woman in a plain dress waved her hand casually. Bang! Li Xuanqing's entire body trembled violently, and then his body vanished. At this moment, she looked at Yi Xian. Absorb him. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly let go of the soul-suppressing sword in his hand. The soul-suppressing sword transformed into a black ray of light, and entered Li Xuanqing's body. Bang! Li Xuanqing's entire body trembled violently, and his soul gradually started to vanish swiftly. It was absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. However, because his soul was very strong, the soul-suppressing sword was actually unable to absorb it immediately. Li Xuanqing wanted to resist, but he couldn't resist at all. It was as if his body had been frozen. As he watched his soul vanish bit by bit, Li Xuanqing was finally terrified. He was truly terrified, because he knew that once his soul was absorbed, then it was equivalent to being wiped out. At this point, Li Xuanqing suddenly roared furiously. Do you dare let me call for help? Call for help. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman glanced at Li Xuanqing, and then she waved her hand lightly. The soul-suppressing sword flew back into her grasp, and then she gazed at Li Xuanqing. Go on. Li Xuanqing glanced coldly at her, and then he gazed at the Supreme Law. Your supremacy, you won't interfere, right? Actually, he was even more afraid of the Supreme Law than the woman in a plain dress. Even though the woman had destroyed his body with a single swing of her sword, as far as he was concerned, It was because he'd been imprisoned by the supreme law. The supreme law glanced at Li Xianqing. I won't interfere. Li Xianqing instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He opened up his palm, and a violet token suddenly appeared there. Li Xianqing silently chanted an incantation, and it didn't take long for the violet token to suddenly shoot into the sky and vanish in the deepest depths of the starry sky. Meanwhile, the supreme law suddenly said, "Is there something wrong with your head?" Li Xianqing gazed at the supreme law, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, "Senior, what do you mean?" The supreme law sighed softly and didn't say another word. Actually, she suddenly understood a little. Was Li Xianqing stupid? He definitely wasn't stupid. Not to mention Li Xianqing. Even she herself had underestimated the woman in a plain dress in the beginning. However, unlike Li Xianqing, she'd immediately realized how terrifying the woman in a plain dress was as soon as she attacked. She was an outsider. Moreover, she was the second outsider she'd encountered. Meanwhile, the woman in a plain dress turned around and walked over to Yi Xian, and then she passed the sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took the sword and asked, "Qing, how do I utilize the energy of time?" The woman said, "The energy of time within it has two uses. The first is offensive. With this sword in hand, one can enter anyone's temporal dimension at will." When she spoke up to this point, she paused for a moment and said, "Except for one type of person." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Which type?" The woman said, "Time cultivators." The supreme law's expression suddenly changed when he heard her. "Greetings, time cultivators." The woman glanced at the supreme law. "Yes." The supreme law said solemnly, "What do you think of them, senior?" The woman in a plain dress was expressionless. "A bunch of retards." The supreme law, Yi Xian asked, "Why do you say that?" The woman in a plain dress said, "They're cultivating in the wrong direction." The supreme law, who was at the side, hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" The woman in a plain dress glanced at the supreme law. "Don't ask such a low-level question." The supreme law, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, wanting to speak but holding back. Qing looked at Yi Xian. "You want to know?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman in a plain dress immediately explained, "Time isn't alone. There's only time when there's space-time. Without space-time, where's time?" They studied time, but neglected the Tao of space-time, which was equivalent to putting the cart before the horse. Time is built on the foundation of space-time. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "Do you understand? If not, I'll explain in more detail." The supreme law, who was at the side, had an extremely ugly expression. Damn it! Why was there such a huge difference between people? Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "I understand." The woman in a plain dress nodded. "You just have to remember one thing. Space and time are inseparable." "That's not right. It's under the current laws of the universe that space and time are inseparable, which is space-time. This is because the place where the living beings of this current universe live is in space-time." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian's sword. "I've used this universe's main time vein to forge the sword's body. In other words, with this sword, no one can enter the space-time dimension, including those so-called time cultivators. Actually, this sword's power of time is rather special. You can slowly study it in the future, and it'll have a miraculous effect on you now." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." At this moment, the supreme law, who was at the side, hesitated for a moment, then said, "Senior, you said that within the current laws of the universe, time and space are inseparable. Does that mean that other universes can be separated?" The woman in a plain dress looked at the supreme law coldly. "Why do you have so much to say? Do you want to die?" The supreme law, Yi Xian. Chapter 1764. At this moment, the supreme law was extremely depressed. The reason why she had asked again was that she felt that the woman in the plain dress should be very easy to talk to. After all, Yi Xian would answer all her questions, and his attitude was surprisingly good. But at this moment, she realized that the woman in the plain dress only had a good attitude towards this young man. After figuring it out, The Supreme Law couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Who exactly is this young man? Meanwhile, Li Xianqing, who hadn't died yet, stared at the woman in the plain dress. A bad feeling suddenly arose in his heart, and this feeling was spreading ceaselessly. Why does this woman dare to berate the legendary Supreme Law? Yet this Supreme Law doesn't even dare to make a sound. Who exactly is she? In the distance, the woman in the plain dress picked up Yi Xian's sword. She used her finger to trace down the blade until she reached the tip, and then she flicked it lightly. Oem! A sword hum instantly resounded throughout the starry sky. Qing! Passed the sword in her hand to Yi Xian. Give it a name. Yi Xian smiled. Let's call it Qing Xian sword. Qing Xian. The woman looked at Yi Xian. You know my name? Yi Xian nodded and smiled. Is it good? The corners of the woman's mouth curled up slightly. Excellent. Yi Xian laughed. I think it's excellent too. The woman suddenly turned to look at Li Xianqing. Are your people here? Li Xianqing looked at the woman. Miss, can you let this matter go for the sake of the small abode? At this moment, he'd realized that something was off. This woman before him was definitely not an ordinary person. The woman looked at Li Xianqing. Sure. Li Xianqing instantly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress spoke again. If you die, then we can settle this peacefully. Li Xianqing. How arrogant of you. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the distant starry sky. In the next moment, an extremely terrifying pressure swept out from the depths of the starry sky like a tidal wave. And it was extremely shocking, as if it wanted to crush the starry sky. The Supreme Law took a glance at the depths of the starry sky and frowned. Had this small grotto heaven gone mad? Who gave them the guts? At this time, an old man suddenly appeared above everyone. The old man was dressed in a long black robe, his hair and beard all white. His eyes were as sharp as blades, and no one dared to look at him directly. Above the old man's head, there was a faint golden halo. Li Xianqing immediately bowed deeply when he saw the old man. Master! The old man looked at Li Xianqing and scolded coldly. You actually had your body destroyed by someone. How embarrassing. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly flicked her sleeve. A ray of sword light suddenly flew out. The old man didn't even have time to react before a ray of sword light pierced through his forehead. In an instant, his body shattered and only his soul remained. Li Xianqing. The old man was dumbfounded. His body was gone. At the side, the Supreme Law glanced at the woman in the plain dress, and deep fear flashed across his eyes. Because even she couldn't withstand that sword strike just now. Opposite the woman in the plain dress, the old man was still in a dumbfounded state. He looked at the woman in the plain dress blankly. How is this possible? The woman in the plain dress turned to look at Li Xianqing. Is there anyone else? Li Xianqing stared fixedly at the woman in the plain dress, and didn't speak. At this moment, the fear in his heart couldn't be described with any words. His master was a half-step little saint. A half-step little saint. An existence of this level had already come into contact with the current universe. In the ancestral hall of the Yi clan in Green City. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as crown prince will be removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The person who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly resounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over, and saw a little girl standing at the door. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old. Her little hands were tightly holding the corners of her skirt, and her face was sickly pale. She looked a little weak, and there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to everyone in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Grand Elder, my brother Yi Xian, is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Grand Elder glanced coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Grand Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage, and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders and said, "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair." Impudent. The Grand Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Grand Elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. It's everyone's wish. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 personal guards. You can be my personal guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince. I'm willing to die 1,000 deaths." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting long robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt dizzy, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, A slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall, as she asked timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1765. The supreme law was a little strange. This guy. She did not dare to be careless and nodded. Young Master Yi, that small grotto heaven is not simple. Don't be careless. She actually wanted to destroy the small grotto heaven, not only to form a good relationship with Yi Xian and his sister, but also because the small grotto heaven made her very unhappy. However, she would not do it, because she still remembered what the woman in the plain dress had said just now. That was, the woman in the plain dress wanted Yi Xian to deal with it himself. It was obvious that she wanted the small grotto heaven for Yi Xian to practice. As if thinking of something, the supreme law suddenly asked, "Young Master Yi, that senior just now is?" Yi Xian smiled. "My sister." The supreme law looked at Yi Xian. "Sister?" Yi Xian nodded. The supreme law remained silent, but his expression grew more and more solemn. After a while the supreme law said, "Young Master Yi, take care." After saying that, she turned and left. Today was a very meaningful day for her. Most of the time, it was not a bad thing to recognize one's own insignificance. After the supreme law left, Yi Xian looked at the sword in his hand, the corner of his mouth slightly raised. The sword in his hand was way too awesome. Mortal severing realm? He could really kill with one sword. Never mind a mortal severing realm. He could even kill a regular space-time realm powerhouse. And now, he actually had a chance to reach the mortal severing realm, but he still wanted to cultivate to the heaven ascension realm first. He wanted to cultivate to the limitless realm. Steady and steady. After a while, Yi Xian sheathed his sword, turned and left. In another part of the starry sky, the three demon kings suddenly stopped in their tracks. Beside her, Yu Mu asked, "What's wrong?" The three demon kings looked at the end of the starry sky in the distance. Li Xianqing is gone. Dead. Yu Mu's face instantly darkened. That woman killed Li Xianqing. The three demon kings said softly, "She is much stronger than we thought. She should have surpassed space-time realm." Yu Mu looked at the three demon kings. "What should we do now?" After a moment of silence, the third goblin king said, "Return to the Sky Goblin Kingdom." With that, he turned around and left. The Sky Demon Kingdom would never be able to take revenge for this. His intuition told him that if he chose to take revenge, more people would die. She looked at the depths of the starry sky with Mu for a moment, then turned around and left. Yi Xian returned to the All-Heaven City. At this moment, Jian Mu and the other three were in secluded meditation. They were all trying to break through to the mortal severing tier. In the Sword League's main hall, Yi Xian looked at the sword maniac in front of him. "Sister Nian and the others have left?" Sword maniac nodded. "They left after coming out of seclusion." Yi Xian asked, "Do you know where he went?" The sword maniac shook his head. "I don't know." Yi Xian felt a little helpless. Sister Nian and Tu were really too much. They didn't even bid farewell to him before leaving. Sword maniac glanced at Yi Xian. "You seem to have become stronger." Yi Xian smiled. "Didn't you also reach the Heaven Ascension realm?" The current sword maniac was in the Heaven Ascension realm. Moreover, his aura was vigorous. Absolutely not something an ordinary Heaven Ascension realm could compare to. After a moment of silence, Sword Maniac said, "What do you plan to do next?" Yi Xian smiled. "To the Ancient Realm." Sword Maniac frowned slightly. "Ancient Realm?" Yi Xian asked, "You know about it?" Sword Maniac nodded. "Sword Ju and the others have been there before." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you know about that place?" Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Shrine. Ancestors. Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile hanging on the corner of the youth's mouth. This person was Yi Lang, and on both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? Just then, A somewhat timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over to see a little girl standing at the door. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old, her two little hands tightly gripping the corner of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale, looking a little weak, and there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder coldly glanced at Yi Ling. This is a family matter. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan Hill. He's fighting for the clan, and his life is uncertain. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder coldly replied. Then flog 30 times. Very quickly, two Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Ling looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince. Yi Ling nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I won't hesitate to die 10,000 times. Yi Ling nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Ling, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Ling's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting long robe, and his robe was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Ling did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu. as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. Beside him were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall, as she asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times, as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder squinted his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Peng! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 1766. Invincible. The black-clothed men and the others looked at each other. This Heaven Ascension stage guy actually said he was invincible? At this time, the black-clothed man in the lead suddenly said, "Don't be careless, this person is not simple." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, you're only at the Heaven Ascension stage. You can't protect the divine level spring of eternal life. If you're smart, you'd better." At this time, a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. The voice of the black-clothed man in the lead came to an abrupt stop. Instant kill. The black-clothed men in the field were all dumbfounded. Instant kill. Yi Xian himself was also dumbfounded. He had actually instantly killed this guy. This was the mortal severing stage. Moreover, he had just casually struck out with his sword. He had not used the single sword to determine life and death, or the sword drawing technique. And it was such a casual strike that had instantly killed a mortal severing stage expert. Was this the terror of the green profound sword? In the instant that the green profound sword pierced through the black-clothed man's forehead, it began to madly absorb his soul. In the blink of an eye, the green profound sword had completely absorbed his soul, and the other black-clothed men were already somewhat panicking. Instant kill. Their boss had actually been instantly killed. What was there left to do? The others immediately fled, and at this time, a thought flashed through their minds. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In an instant, more than 10 bloody heads directly flew out. All of them flew out at the same time. After those heads flew out, the green profound sword suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Looking at the green profound sword in front of him, Yi Xian's expression became unprecedentedly serious. He had still underestimated the terror of the green profound sword. Without the obstruction of space and time, the speed of the green profound sword was too terrifying. Not to mention the mortal severing stage. Even some space-time experts could not stop it. After a long silence, Yi Xian reached out and grasped the green profound sword. At this moment he had a feeling. Invincible. This was invincible. Holding this sword, he suddenly felt that even a space-time realm expert was like an ant. Thinking to this point, Yi Xian suddenly frowned. He suddenly felt that it might not be a good thing for him to keep holding on to this sword. Because this was the strength of the sword, not his own strength. He had to be clear about this. Otherwise, he might be lost in the power of this sword. Of course, he wouldn't give up on this sword because of this. What a joke. This was something Qing'er had specially made for him. As long as he could maintain his original heart and recognize himself, it would be fine. After a short moment, Yi Xian put the green profound sword away, and then he transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the distance. To the ancient realm. The ancient realm. The ancient world was located in the ancient god star field. This was a very, very ancient star field. Not only did this star field have a long history, but it also had a very powerful martial arts civilization. This place was also known as the center of the universe. Many martial artists even treated this place as the starting point of the martial arts civilization in the universe. The entire ancient God Star area was very prosperous, and the forces were very complicated. At the entrance of the ancient God Star area, an old man in a gray robe kept sizing up the people entering the ancient God Star area in the distance. The old man in the gray robe was a little hunched, and he looked a little thin, but his eyes were very lively. Beside the old man in the gray robe was a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man glanced at the people going in and out of the place in the distance and smiled. "Oldly, you've been looking for so long. Haven't you seen anyone suitable? Green City, Yi Family Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince is removed, and Yi Lang will succeed him." The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi family. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li family over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the family is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he is crippled or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 guards of the Yi residence rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered. "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position, and it is everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only clutched her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You are very good. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 personal guards. From now on, you will be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I am willing to die 10,000 times." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back." "Understood." Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting long robe, and his robe was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's entire face was a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent! The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Lang's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1767. At this moment, Old Li was convinced that Yi Xian was the young king of Sky Demon Kingdom. He had a deity-level spring of immortality with him. That was a deity-level spring of immortality. Only Sky Demon Kingdom and Ancient God World's top forces could have it. Because the deity-level spring of immortality was in the hands of these super forces. Old Li's respect for Yi Xian grew. This was the real young king of Sky Demon Kingdom. I must serve him well. The two continued forward. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Old Li, tell me about this ancient world. You know that Sky Demon Kingdom is very far away from here. Therefore, I don't know much about the forces in this place. Old Li quickly nodded. Young Master Yi, there are many forces in this ancient world, and it's very complicated. This is because some forces from the outside world often come here. However, it's actually very difficult for them to survive here, because this place is very xenophobic. Yi Xian nodded. Which force is the strongest? Old Li said, There are two strongest. The first is the Great Spiritual Palace. The Great Spiritual Palace is located in the Ancient God City. The Ancient God City is their subsidiary city, and there is a great saint in the Great Spiritual Palace. Great Sage. Yi Xian nodded. What about the other one? Old Li said, The other one is War Pavilion. They are located on War God Mountain in the north of Ancient God Star Field. It's very far from here. Although they are also from Ancient God Star Field, they will not come to Ancient God City, because this is Great Spiritual Palace's territory. He paused for a moment before continuing. The Battle Pavilion is a group of very, very scary people. Yi Xian said with a smile. How so? Old Li said. The War Pavilion advocates fighting, and they especially like to stir up trouble. They are the kind that will fight if there's a disagreement. He looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, if you meet people from the War Pavilion, you must be careful. Don't provoke them, At this point he suddenly stopped. This was the young king of Sky Demon Kingdom. The Sky Demon Empire was no weaker than the Battle Pavilion. Elderly bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, the The Sky Demon Nation is definitely not afraid of the Battle Pavilion. However, the people from the Battle Pavilion are not easy to deal with. Young master, you have to be careful if you encounter them. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Thank you for the reminder." As they spoke, they arrived at the ancient god city. When he arrived at the ancient god city, Yi Xian was shocked. The entire ancient god city stood in the starry sky like a giant beast in deep slumber. Standing in front of the city gate, one could not help but feel minuscule. 3,000 meters above ancient god city, there was a statue of a middle-aged man that was 3,000 meters tall. The middle-aged man was dressed in a white robe. His right hand was behind his back, and his eyes were cold as he looked ahead. It was as if the world was nothing but an ant to him. Yi Xian glanced at the statue. "This is..." Oldly laughed and said, "Gu Qingshen." It is said that he is the first expert who has surpassed the sage realm in the ancient god star region. "God," Yi Xian said softly. "Did they become saints or gods by themselves or by others?" Oldly smiled embarrassedly. "I don't know about that." Yi Xian nodded and said, "Let's enter the city." As they spoke, the two of them arrived before the city gate, and there stood a man in armor. Oldly hurriedly walked over to the man in armor, and then he took out 20 Eternal Life Saint crystals and offered them to the man. The man in armor nodded slightly, and then he gestured for them to enter the city. After Oldly led Yi Xian into the city, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "This great spiritual god palace must be very rich." Oldly said, "Not just ordinarily rich." Yi Xian smiled and glanced at the surroundings. Needless to say, this ancient god city was really prosperous, and there were many experts. Although Heaven Ascension Realm experts weren't as common as dogs, there were still quite a number of them. Among the 10 people, at least 2 or 3 were Heaven Ascension Realm experts. At that time, void rank experts were everywhere like dogs. As expected of the city center of the current universe. Shouldn't I keep a low profile? Meanwhile, Oldly suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, where are you going now?" Yi Xian was about to speak when the sound of fighting suddenly resounded from afar. "Fighting?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You can fight here?" Oldly smiled and said, "Normally it's not allowed. However, the higher-ups usually don't care. Of course, the precondition is that it doesn't cause too much of a commotion. Moreover, many people would enter the river of time as they fight. There aren't many people who dare to cause trouble in the city." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Let's go take a look." As he spoke, he walked towards the distance. Oldly hurriedly followed him. In next to no time, Yi Xian arrived before a luxurious shop, and a woman was in confrontation with a few men before the luxurious shop. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the woman. "What the fuck? I actually encountered someone I know here." Oldly, who stood by Yi Xian's side, glanced at the luxurious shop and said, "The Divine Armament Pavilion. This young lady has probably been tricked." Yi Xian gazed at Oldly. "What do you mean?" Oldly shook his head. "This young lady has just arrived in Ancient God Galaxy, and people like her are like fat lambs to these profiteers. Moreover, she's so beautiful. She's probably finished. The Divine Armament Pavilion has an extraordinary background." Yi Xian gazed at the woman. Even though she was surrounded by a few people, her expression was calm and didn't show even a trace of nervousness. Yi Xian smiled, but he had no intention of attacking. He crossed his arms and was prepared to watch the show. An old man stared fixedly at the woman. "Miss, you broke a divine artifact of my Divine Armament Pavilion. Aren't you going to give us an explanation?" The woman smiled. "How interesting. If it really was a divine artifact, then would it have been broken?" The old man's expression was calm. "No matter what, you must give my Divine Armament Pavilion an explanation today." The woman smirked. "Are you sure you want to blackmail me? Let me tell you, my background isn't simple." The old man looked at the woman. "Is that so?" As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and 3 mortal severing realm elites appeared behind the woman. The woman suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Are you just going to watch me get bullied?" Yi Xian was speechless. So she had found out about him. Yi Xian walked up to the woman and smiled. "I didn't expect to see you here." The woman in front of him was none other than Dao Yi. Dao Yi. Yi Xian didn't expect to see her here. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. If I said I'm here for you, would you believe me? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't. Dao Yi smiled, and was about to speak when the old man suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Are you trying to stand up for me? Yi Xian looked at the old man and smiled. I'm a reasonable person. You said my friend broke a divine artifact of your divine armament pavilion. May I know what divine artifact she broke? The old man said indifferently. What, you want compensation? Yi Xian said seriously. Of course. Isn't it only right and proper to compensate for the damage? The old man looked at Yi Xian and opened his palm. In his hand was a pile of fragments that looked like a vase. The old man said, This is an ancient divine vase, worth 100,000 eternal saint crystals. Since you're so polite, I'll give you a discount. 90,000 eternal saint crystals will do. 90,000 eternal saint crystals. Hearing this, some people shook their heads. That thing isn't even worth a single eternal saint crystal. It's clearly extortion. However, no one said anything because Yi Xian and Dao Yi were obviously from the outside world. Yi Xian glanced at the ancient divine vase and spoke seriously. It really is a treasure. As he spoke, he turned around to look at Dao Yi. You actually broke such a precious treasure. How careless of you. Dao Yi blinked. Then what should we do? Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. I think 90,000 eternal saint crystals is too little. How about I give you something to make up for it? The old man gazed at Yi Xian. What is it? Yi Xian opened his palm, and spirit beginning appeared on his arm. A divine rank eternal life spring. Someone exclaimed in surprise. It didn't take long for the expressions of everyone here to change. A divine rank eternal life spring. This young man actually has a divine rank eternal life spring with him. Everyone gazed at Yi Xian with terror. Where'd this great figure come from? Meanwhile, the expression of the old man who stood before Yi Xian had instantly changed. He's carrying a divine rank eternal life spring with him. Was this King crazy? Yi Xian gazed at the old man and smiled. Here, I'll make up for it. As he spoke, he passed spirit beginning over. The old man's expression changed drastically. He hesitated for a moment before he bowed slightly. Young master, this is a misunderstanding. A huge misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Yi Xian blinked. What misunderstanding? My friend broke that divine vase of yours, so we should compensate him. If you think this divine rank eternal life spring isn't enough, then it's fine. I'll ask my family to send a few more over right away. Ask my family to send a few more. All the spectators gasped. The divine weapon pavilion is doomed. What kind of god did we offend? The old man who stood before Yi Xian turned pale, and he hurriedly bowed respectfully and spoke with a trembling voice. Young master, this really is a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding. Yi Xian smiled. What? Do you think one divine rank eternal life spring isn't enough? If it isn't, then I'll ask my family to send a few more over right now. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a transmission talisman appeared in his hand. The old man was horrified when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly bowed deeply. Young master, this is a misunderstanding, and it's my divine weapon pavilion's fault for offending your friend. Please be magnanimous and don't make a fuss about it with us. Yi Xian's smile gradually turned cold. Make a fuss about it? What are you talking about? My friend broke something of yours, so I paid for it. Yet you're saying that I'm making a fuss about it? The old man was on the verge of tears when he heard this. What sort of person is he? Yi Xian gazed at the old man. Here, take it. The old man hurriedly shook his head. No, I wouldn't dare. Yi Xian suddenly spoke angrily. What? Are you looking down on me and my Sky Demon Kingdom? Sky Demon Kingdom? The old man slumped to the ground when he heard this, and his face was completely devoid of blood. Chapter 1768. The Sky Demon Empire. Everyone was struck dumb when they had heard what Yi Xian had said. It's the Sky Demon Empire. What sort of existence is the Sky Demon Empire? It's an extraordinary power that's comparable to the great spiritual god's palace. Many people in the surroundings revealed pity in their eyes as they gazed at the old man who stood before Yi Xian. The divine armament pavilion is truly finished after offending the Sky Demon Empire. Suddenly, a woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. She wore a violet dress, and she had picturesque features. She was very beautiful. She glanced at Yi Xian, and then she bowed slightly. "Young master, I'm the person in charge of the divine armament pavilion, Little Ru. Everything that happened just now was because of my divine armament." "Shut up," Yi Xian suddenly interrupted her, and then he gazed at her. "Did I allow you to speak?" The woman was speechless. Yi Xian took the pile of fragments from the old man's hand and smiled. "This is a divine bottle from the ancient times. It's from the ancient times." As he spoke, he gazed at the old man. "What? Do you really think that one divine rank spring of eternal life isn't enough?" The old man's face was pale as a sheet, and he turned around to look at Little Ru. Little Ru hesitated for a moment before she said, "Young master, this is a misunderstanding." Yi Xian gazed at her and smiled. "Is it a misunderstanding just because you say so?" Little Ru hesitated for a moment before she said, "Young master, we're willing to compensate you for your losses." Yi Xian blinked. "Shouldn't I be the one to compensate you?" Little Ru hurriedly shook her head. "We should be the ones to compensate you." Yi Xian smiled. "Do I look like someone who needs money?" Little Ru was speechless. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "The divine armament pavilion can cease to exist." As soon as he finished speaking, the transmission talisman in his hand started to tremble. Little Ru's expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly said, "Young master, this is just a misunderstanding. At this time, a black-robed elder suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian. The elder suddenly flicked his finger, and a storage ring fell in front of Yi Xian. "Young master, this is a small gift from my divine weapon pavilion. Please accept it." Yi Xian took a look at the storage ring. There were 10 million eternal holy crystals in the ring. 10 million. How generous. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and said with a smile, "Do you think I'm a beggar?" Black costume old man quickly said, "Young master, my divine weapon pavilion has a few divine items. I wonder if young master is interested." Saying this, he took out another storage ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian took a glance inside the storage ring. There was a black armor, a long sword, and a pair of gloves. One look and you could tell that it was no ordinary creature. Yi Xian passed the ring to Dao Yi. "Take a look." Dao Yi took a look, and then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Do you like it?" Dao Yi smiled. "What if I don't?" Yi Xian said. "Then I'll destroy the divine weapon pavilion." "Destroy the divine weapon pavilion." Black costume old man's eyelids twitched when he heard Yi Xian's words, and his expression changed subtly. Dao Yi looked at the storage ring for a long time, and then she smiled. "I like it." With that, she put the storage ring away. Black costume old man and the others heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this. Yi Xian smiled. "It's good that you like it." With that, he turned to look at black costume old man. "Thank you." Black costume old man hurriedly said, "You're welcome, young master." Yi Xian smiled, and then he took Dao Yi's hand and left. Dao Yi instinctively tried to struggle free, but Yi Xian's grip was very tight, and she couldn't struggle at all. Dao Yi glanced at Yi Xian and didn't resist. It didn't take long for Yi Xian's group of 3 to vanish nearby. Meanwhile, black costume old man heaved a heavy sigh of relief. At this moment, his palms were covered in sweat. Little Ru spoke in a low voice. "Elder, is he really from the Sky Demon Kingdom?" Black costume old man gazed into the distance and spoke softly. "That isn't important. What's important is that he's absolutely not someone we can afford to offend." Little Ru nodded, and then she hesitated for a moment before she said, "But I don't think he's from the Sky Demon Kingdom, because he's a human." Black costume old man suddenly interrupted Little Ru. "Don't worry about whether he's from the Sky Demon Kingdom or not, because that isn't important. What's important is that we can't afford to offend him. Understand?" His tone had become quite fierce. Little Ru nodded and didn't dare to speak again. A person who carried a divine-level spring of immortality with him was definitely not someone the Divine Weapon Pavilion could afford to offend. Black costume old man suddenly turned to look at the old man who was still sitting on the ground. Go out and train before coming back. Having said that, he turned and left. On the ground, the old man smiled bitterly. He knew that he would never be able to return to the ancient God Star region. However, to him, this was already the best outcome. At least he could live. In the distance, Yi Xian held Dao Yi's hand and slowly walked towards the end of the street. Dao Yi said nothing, nor did he try to break free from Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Yi and smiled. I think we're still friends. What do you think? Dao Yi did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Don't be like that. Even if I'm not God Yi, we've been together for a while. I think we still have feelings for each other. What do you think? Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. After a while she said with a smile. Of course. Yi Xian asked softly. Do you mean it? Dao Yi nodded. In fact, she did have feelings for Yi Xian. In fact, she could not bring herself to hate Yi Xian. Yi Xian let go of Dao Yi's hand and smiled. Dao Yi, I hope your universal laws are fine. Really? Dao Yi nodded. I know. Yi Xian said with a smile. All right. Let's not talk about these unhappy things. By the way, why did you come to the ancient God Star region this time? Dao Yi said. I want to join the great spiritual God palace. Yi Xian asked why. Dao Yi smiled. I want to learn the laws of the great spiritual God palace. They have the supreme laws of this universe. The supreme laws. He thought of that woman from back then, the supreme law of nature. That was the real supreme law. And it was the real deal. Unfortunately, he did not ask for her contact information. Otherwise, he could have recommended Dao Yi to learn from her. What a pity. At that moment, Dao Yi suddenly asked, What about you? Yi Xian said with a smile. I just want to wander around and see the strong people in this universe. Dao Yi's expression was a little complicated. I haven't seen you for a long time and I can't see through you now. Although Yi Xian was in the heaven ascension state, he gave her a very dangerous feeling. Yi Xian smiled. Haven't you reached the heaven ascension state? Actually, I'm a little curious. How did you reach the heaven ascension state? Dao Yi blinked. I'm not telling you. Yi Xian was speechless. At that moment, Old Li, who was behind Yi Xian, suddenly said, Young Master Yi, there are some mysterious auras around us. Yi Xian glanced around and said with a smile, I know. They must be here for the divine level spring of eternal life. Old Li's eyes flashed with a cold light. They even dare to covet the Sky Demon Kingdom. They really don't know what's good for them. Yi Xian said with a smile, Let them be. As he spoke, he looked at Dao Yi. I'll accompany you to the great spiritual God palace. Dao Yi hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Yi Xian turned to Old Li and quickly said, I'll lead the way. Under Old Li's lead, the three went straight to the great spiritual God palace. Along the way, Yi Xian discovered that more and more people were secretly watching him. Clearly, the temptation of the divine level spring of eternal life was too great. So great that many people would take the risk. Dao Yi looked around, and a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. Aren't you afraid? Yi Xian laughed. What's there to be afraid of? Life and death are nothing. If you're not satisfied, then fight. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. You're a little arrogant now. Yi Xian. Dao Yi was about to speak when the three of them suddenly stopped. There was no one around them at some point in time. Yi Xian smiled. Looks like they're going to make a move. At that moment, a young man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The young man wore a brocade robe and held a folding fan in his hand. He looked elegant and very handsome. The young man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. You're so calm. Yi Xian blinked. Aren't you afraid of my Sky Demon Kingdom? The young man smiled. You're not from Sky Demon Kingdom. Yi Xian smiled. Why do you think so? The young man looked at Yi Xian. Sky Demon Kingdom is mostly made up of demonic beasts. Although there are humans, there are very few of them. Also, if you're really from Sky Demon Kingdom, you wouldn't be so unfamiliar with ancient God Galaxy. It's obvious that this is your first time here. Hearing the young man's words, Mr. Li hesitated for a moment, and then looked at Yi Xian. He was a little suspicious. In fact, he was suspicious from the start. The geniuses of Sky Demon Kingdom wouldn't be unfamiliar with ancient God Galaxy. And it was Yi Xian's first time here. However, because Yi Xian had the divine level spring of eternal life, his doubts were dispelled. Yi Xian smiled. Is that why you dare to make a move? The young man smiled. You claim to be the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom. But as far as I know, the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom isn't human, and he's not a man. As he spoke, his smile turned cold. You dare to pretend to be the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom? You've got guts. Yi Xian smiled. You've said so much, because you want to know my real identity, right? The young man looked at Yi Xian without a word. Yi Xian shook his head. Actually, no matter who I am, you're already prepared to make a move. After all, I'm only at Heaven Ascension state. Also, you must have investigated and know that I don't have a mysterious expert with me. Am I right? The young man looked at Yi Xian for a moment and smiled. Yes. Yi Xian opened his palm, and Ling Chu appeared on his arm. He looked at the young man and smiled. This is the divine level spring of eternal life. Hurry up and do it. As long as you kill me, you can obtain the divine level spring of eternal life. Come on. I'm ready. The young man went silent for a moment before he said, Can you not be so arrogant? We are the robbers. It's like you're robbing us. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. I haven't been updating well recently, so I'm not asking for votes anymore. I know myself very well. Chapter 1769. It had to be said that the young man was a little hesitant at this moment. Damn it. What right does this guy have to be so arrogant? What right does he have? This is not normal. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Brother, can you be a little more decisive when robbing? The young man hesitated, then said, Brother, do you have some trump card? If you do, can you reveal a little in advance? If it's strong, we'll turn enemies into friends. What do you think? Yi Xian gave him a thumbs up. You're really shameless. The young man smiled awkwardly. I have to be careful in a small business. Yi Xian sized up the young man. You're at the mortal severing realm? The young man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian sized up the young man, then said, You should have a lot of treasures on you. Hearing this, the young man's eyelids twitched, and he looked at Yi Xian with a hint of wariness in his eyes. This guy wants to rob me instead? At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the young man's right. Why are you talking nonsense with him? Kill him first. As he spoke, a burly man suddenly walked out, and the burly man charged directly at Yi Xian. However, he was stopped by the young man. The burly man turned to look at the young man. What are you doing? The young man looked at Yi Xian. We don't want this divine level spring of eternal life anymore. The burly man was taken aback, then said, Why? The young man directly slapped the burly man's head and said angrily, Ask your ass. Are you the boss or am I the boss? The burly man hesitated, then said, You're the boss. The young man turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. I haven't exposed my background yet. Why did you stop? The young man smiled. Brother, although you're only at the Heaven Ascension realm, your aura is thick. I'm afraid that ordinary mortal severing realm experts are not your opponent. Brother, farewell. With that, he turned to leave. Wait. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly spoke. The young man stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Since you don't want to rob me, then I'll rob you. Hand over everything. At this moment, the burly man suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Gigolo, don't be so arrogant. Do you dare to take my hammer strike? Gigolo? Yi Xian frowned and turned to look at Dao Yi. Am I very fair? Dao Yi sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile. Quite handsome. Yi Xian blinked. I think so too. Dao Yi shook his head. You're getting more and more shameless. Yi Xian was about to speak when the burly man suddenly said angrily, You two are openly flirting. Do you think we brothers don't exist? As he spoke, he suddenly leaped up. Then, he gripped a giant hammer and slammed it down at Yi Xian's head. Peak of the mortal severing realm. Moreover, his aura was fierce. One look, and it was obvious that he was in the mortal severing realm. Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and swung his sword. It was just an ordinary sword strike. Boom! With this strike, the burly man was directly sent back to his original spot, and the giant hammer in his hand was directly split into countless pieces. Seeing this scene, the young man's eyes suddenly narrowed. Swordsman. The burly man looked at Yi Xian, a little shocked. You're a swordsman. Swordsman was the worst group of people to provoke. Not only did they like to fight, but they also had a bad temper. Yi Xian laughed. I'm a swordsman. The young man took a long look at Yi Xian. Dinyo, you retreat first. The burly man hurriedly shook his head. Retreat my ass. Do you think I, Dinyo, would abandon my brothers? If you don't leave, then I won't leave. The young man said. Then you stay and stop him. I'll leave. Fuck. Dinyo turned to look at the young man with an astonished expression. Big brother, are you serious? The young man spoke indifferently. What do you think? Dinyo hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Big brother, you stay. Don't worry. I'll take good care of sister-in-law. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. The young man's face darkened. Yi Xian looked at the young man and smiled. There's definitely more than two of you, right? The young man smiled. Sir, there's more than two of us. However, we regret it now. Sir, can we stop now? Yi Xian smiled. I'm curious. Why did you suddenly give up? The young man looked at Yi Xian. I can't defeat you. Yi Xian frowned. We haven't fought yet. The young man shook his head. Your strength has exceeded my expectations. Even if we can kill you, we'll have to pay a terrible price. I don't want to pay that price. So I choose to give up. Yi Xian said with a smile. Just go. The young man glanced at Yi Xian and cupped his fists. Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly stopped and said, Be careful. Although we've given up, there's a group of people who won't give up. However, there is a group of people who will never give up. They have their eyes on you. Yi Xian smiled. Thank you. The young man looked at Yi Xian. Aren't you going to ask which group I'm from? Yi Xian gently flicked his sleeve. Under the Saint Realm, I'm invincible. Above the Saint Realm, 1 for 1. The young man looked at Yi Xian. After a long while he said, You're bragging. If you're not at the Heaven Ascension stage, I'll believe you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and disappeared at the end of the street. Yi Xian glanced at the end of the street in the distance, then turned to look at Dao Yi. Let's go. I'll send you to the great spiritual god palace. Dao Yi nodded. The two continued forward. Old Li hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly followed. After Yi Xian and the other two disappeared at the end of the street, the young man and the burly man appeared again. Beside them was a black-robed woman. The burly man said in a low voice, Boss, that's the divine level spring of eternal life. The young man said softly, Life is more important. The burly man looked at the young man. What does Big Brother mean? The young man's eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness. That sword strike was just a casual strike, the very casual kind. As he spoke, he slowly clenched his right hand. He hid his strength. If we fight, we might win. But it will be a Pyrrhic victory. The price is too high. Moreover, this person dared to pretend to be the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom. What does this mean? It means he's not afraid of Sky Demon Kingdom at all. This person's background is not simple. The burly man said in a low voice. What a pity. The young man smiled. It's a pity indeed. I almost couldn't help but want to fight just now. But staying alive is more important. He also wanted to take a gamble. As long as he obtained a divine level spring of eternal life, not only would his brother's fates change, but the fates of their loved ones would also be changed. A divine level spring of eternal life. It was too tempting. However, he still endured it. When facing Yi Xian, his intuition told him that he couldn't beat this young man. And he chose to believe in his intuition. At this moment, the black-robed woman suddenly said, They're going to fight. The young man looked into the distance and smiled. Come, let's see if my choice is wrong. Far away at the end of the street, Dao Yi suddenly said, How did you get this divine level spring of eternal life? Yi Xian smiled. My friend gave it to me. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. How did your friend get this divine-level spring of eternal life? Yi Xian said. My dad helped. Dao Yi. At this moment Old Li suddenly said. Young Master Yi, we're about to reach the great spiritual palace. As long as we cross the street in front, we'll enter a martial arts prohibited zone. At that time, no one will dare to fight us. Martial arts prohibited zone? Yi Xian frowned. What's a martial arts prohibited zone? Old Li quickly explained. It's a martial arts prohibited zone. This is a rule set by the Great Spiritual Palace. No one is allowed to fight animals in a martial arts prohibited zone. Otherwise, it's equivalent to declaring war on the Great Spiritual Palace. Yi Xian said with a smile. It's like a safe zone? Old Li nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. Then we'll have to pick up our pace. Old Li nodded. Just as he was about to speak, an old man suddenly appeared before the three of them. Peak of the mortal severing stage. As the old man appeared, over a dozen men in black appeared around Yi Xian's group. All of them were at the mortal severing stage. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Divine level spring of eternal life, you. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. As soon as he took a step forward, a sword pierced through the old man's brow. Pust. A jet of blood shot out from the old man's brow. Instant kill. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Instant kill? Dao Yi was also shocked. Yi Xian could already instantly kill a mortal severing stage elite? Yi Xian walked up to the old man and shook his head. Too weak. I haven't even used any strength. As he spoke, he pulled out the old man's spatial ring. There were millions of eternal holy crystals in the spatial ring. I'm rich. Yi Xian chuckled. Yi Xian turned to look at the men in black. The men in black's expressions changed drastically, and they disappeared on the spot. They escaped. Instant kill a mortal severing stage elite. Is this heaven ascension stage? This is probably the space-time stage. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Yi. Let's go. Dao Yi glanced at Yi Xian. You've become so strong now. Yi Xian smiled. Just so. Dao Yi. Yi Xian and the others continued forward. Dao Yi took another deep look at Yi Xian. He was extremely shocked. How long had it been since they parted? This guy had already reached this level. How did he cultivate? This was not normal at all. It was too heaven-defying. Just as he was about to step into the forbidden area, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stopped and turned around to look at his surroundings. He called Ling Chu out. I'm going to step into the forbidden area. It's still not too late if you make a move now. The street was silent. Yi Xian frowned. Are you really not going to do anything? This is the divine level spring of eternal life. There was still no response. Yi Xian said solemnly. If you guys don't make a move, I'm going in. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Think carefully. If you miss this opportunity, you won't get another one. Old Li looked at Yi Xian in shock. Yi Xian suddenly got a little angry. Hurry up and snatch it. I'm really just at the heaven ascension boundary. I have no backing. I'm just one person, come and snatch it. After a moment of silence, a voice suddenly came from the end of the street. As if we'll believe you. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1770. I don't believe you. Hearing this, Yi Xian was speechless. Damn it, these guys are not making a move. Beside Yi Xian, Dao Yi rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. You, Yi Xian laughed. Let's go. With that, the three of them walked towards the great spiritual palace. Behind them, the mysterious experts dispersed. In the end, no one dared to make a move. Killing a mortal severing realm expert. Killing a mortal severing realm expert, as an ascension state expert, was too terrifying. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Although the divine level spring of eternal life was good, life was more important. In the dark, the young man who wanted to snatch Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Looks like my intuition was right. The big man nodded. This person's sword principle is so powerful. The young man said softly. That sword strike of his just now was also very casual. Hearing this, the big man's face turned solemn. The young man said in a low voice. He dares to be so arrogant. Even if he is not from the Sky Demon Kingdom, I'm afraid he is from a super force like the small cave heaven. He has backing and cannot be provoked. Disperse. With that, he turned around and left. The big man hesitated and said, "What a pity." With that, he and the woman in black turned around and left. The Great Spiritual Palace. The Great Spiritual Palace was located in the center of the ancient God City. It was the core of the entire ancient God City and the entire ancient God Galaxy. To the cultivators of the universe, the Great Spiritual Palace was undoubtedly a holy land, because this place had the most advanced martial arts civilization. Not only that, the entire Great Spiritual Palace had 8 divine-level spring of eternal life. Cultivating in the Great Spiritual Palace, one's cultivation speed was at least 10 times faster than others. In other words, there were no weaklings in the Great Spiritual Palace. Therefore, countless people wanted to join the Great Spiritual Palace. So long as they could join the Great Spiritual Palace, it was like ascending to the heavens in a single step. However, the Great Spiritual Palace was extremely strict when it came to accepting people. What they valued was talent. This was talent. As long as you had talent, even if you were an ordinary person, they were willing to accept you, because they could nurture you. But if you don't have talent, even if you reach the mortal severing tier, they won't want you. Because of this, the Great Spiritual Divine Palace was filled with monstrous geniuses. Not long after, the 3 of them arrived at the entrance of the Great Spiritual God Palace. At this moment, the entrance was filled with people. The entire Great Spiritual Deity Palace had a total of 10 gates. Each gate was responsible for examining the geniuses who wished to join the Great Spiritual Deity Palace. In any era, talents were very important. Therefore, the Great Spiritual God Palace opened these 10 entrances with the intention of not letting go of any true geniuses and demons. At that moment, Old Li suddenly pointed to the right. "Young Master Yi, do you see that table?" Yi Xian turned his head to look. Under the city wall, there was a circular platform that was more than 100 feet long and wide. Yi Xian asked, "What's that?" Old Li said solemnly, "That's the ancestral stage." Yi Xian frowned. "Ancestral platform?" Old Li nodded. It was left behind by the ancestor of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. Inside it is a strand of his soul. In order to prevent the Great Spiritual Divine Palace from becoming corrupt, he specially left this platform. Anyone who thinks that the Great Spiritual Divine Palace is unfair can step onto this platform and be personally tested by him. Yi Xian said solemnly, "The ancestor will personally test you?" Old Li nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled. "Interesting," Old Li continued. "However, this ancestral stage is also called the death platform, because anyone who steps onto it without the approval of the ancestor of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace will be killed immediately. Since ancient times, only one person has walked down from this death platform." Yi Xian asked, "Who?" Old Li said solemnly, "The current number 1 genius of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace, Li Yaoya. He reached the half-step minor saint before the age of 20. He reached the half-step minor saint before the age of 20. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he heard this. "Damn it! His talent seems to be even greater than mine." Old Li continued. It's worth mentioning that Li Yaoya actually didn't need to step onto the death platform, because he was directly taken as the personal disciple of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace's master. Yi Xian said with a smile. The reason why he did that was to obtain the approval of the ancestor of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace? Old Li nodded. Yes. However, he really took a risk, because if he didn't obtain the approval of the ancestor of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace, he would be killed immediately. Even the current master of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace couldn't save him, but he obtained it. Yi Xian said with a smile. All geniuses are proud. As he spoke, he turned to look at Dao Yi. Are you confident? Dao Yi said with a smile. I'll give it a try. Yi Xian nodded. Go ahead. I'll wait for you. Dao Yi said with a smile. All right. As she spoke, she walked towards a city gate not far away. Old Li glanced at Dao Yi, wanting to speak but hesitating. Yi Xian suddenly said, You don't think she has a chance? Old Li nodded. It's very difficult. Yi Xian was silent. In fact, he also felt that it was difficult. Dao wasn't young, and she was only in the ascending heaven stage. If she was in a place like the 9 dimensions, she would definitely be a genius, but here, it was definitely not enough. At this time it was Dao Yi's turn. Dao Yi started to talk with an old man. About a quarter of an hour later, the old man handed a token to Dao Yi. The corner of Dao Yi's mouth curled up. She turned and walked in front of Yi Xian, then waved the token in her hand. Success! Yi Xian was a little curious. How did you do it? Dao Yi said with a smile. They don't care about the realm. Yi Xian nodded. I know, but they must have asked you something, right? Dao Yi nodded. I said I want to learn the Tao of Law, so he asked me some questions. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. You answered correctly? Dao Yi said with a smile. Of course. Yi Xian gave a thumbs up. Amazing. He realized that so far, only Dao Yi had passed the test. Old Li also quickly cupped his fists. Congratulations, young lady. Dao Yi smiled. Many thanks. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Do you want to try? Yi Xian blinked. Me? Dao Yi nodded. Want to try? Yi Xian was a little hesitant. Dao Yi directly pulled his hand and walked away. In fact, she also hoped to join the great spiritual god palace. It was good to have a companion. Yi Xian was pulled by Dao Yi to a testing door. After a while, it was finally time to discuss Dao with Yi Xian. Yi Xian was pushed in front of an old man by Dao Yi. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. 23, Heaven Ascension Realm. Yi Xian nodded. The old man said again. Your aura is thick without any impurities. However, it is still far from enough. At your age, you should be at least mortal severing realm. Next. Directly denied. Yi Xian smiled. Didn't you say you don't care about the realm? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. If you have other strengths, you can show them. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Tao of Time. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Understanding of Tao of Time? Yi Xian nodded. The old man suddenly became interested. Tell me. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Time and space are inseparable both. Nonsense. The old man suddenly interrupted Yi Xian. Time and space are inseparable? That is your understanding? Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, But is there a problem? The old man said coldly. Time is time, space is space. Both are independent existences. How dare you say they are inseparable? Ridiculous. Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that Qing was wrong? Definitely not. Qing understanding was too forward. Thinking of this, Yi Xian smiled. I was wrong. Goodbye. With that he turned around and left. He did not really want to join the great spiritual god palace. Therefore, he did not think of defending himself. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, Wait. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the old man. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Who told you that time and space are inseparable? Yi Xian smiled. My younger sister. The old man frowned. She is misleading us. Space is space and time is time. Both are independent. How is it inseparable? Yi Xian said with a smile. I was wrong. Goodbye. With that he turned around and left. He felt that there was no need for him to explain. Because Qing's understanding was too advanced. Not to mention this old man. Even the supreme laws were difficult to understand, let alone these people. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly laughed and said, Wait! Yi Xian stopped and turned around. Not far away, a middle-aged man was walking towards him slowly. The old man hurriedly bowed respectfully when he saw the middle-aged man. Greetings, Elder Gu Qing. The middle-aged man grinned. There's no need to be so polite. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. I think he's not bad. Let him join me. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone looked at Yi Xian. Their gazes were slightly strange. That's because of his relationship with Chen Shi. He was clearly eliminated, yet he's been recruited. This is shady. Yi Xian glanced at Elder Gu Qing. Elder, do we know each other? Gu Qing smiled. Don't we know each other now? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I've been eliminated. Gu Qing roared with laughter. Who said that? I'm the outer court elder, and I have the authority to accept anyone. From this moment onward, You're an outer court disciple of my great spiritual god Palace. An outer court disciple. Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. Elder Gu, I've been eliminated. Gu Qing gazed at Yi Xian. Do you think the test of my great spiritual god Palace is a joke? Yi Xian fell silent. Damn it. He smelled a conspiracy. Meanwhile, Gu Qing tossed a wooden token to Yi Xian. Come with me. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, Do you really want to accept me? Gu Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. Do you have a problem with that? Yi Xian said in a low voice. I'm only at the heaven ascension stage. Gu Qing looked at Yi Xian. You don't want to join the great spiritual god Palace? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Gu Qing said coldly. Then why did you come to participate in my great spiritual god Palace's test? Yi Xian said. But I didn't pass. At this moment, the old man at the side suddenly said, You passed. What you said earlier about space and time being inseparable is completely correct. Yi Xian looked at the old man with a face full of astonishment. Fuck, are you so unprincipled? P.S. Do you vote whenever you want? Or do you habitually vote every day after you finish reading? Chapter 1771. Join the Great Spiritual God Palace. Yi Xian was speechless. He had never thought of joining the Great Spiritual God Palace. After all, there were many restrictions in a sect, and he did not want to be bound by them. Moreover, he was a sword cultivator, and did not think that the Great Spiritual God Palace could help him. Moreover, he felt that something was amiss. Why would this guy suddenly ask him to join the Great Spiritual God Palace? At this moment, Dao Yi suddenly smiled and said, Let's join together. Yi Xian looked at Dao Yi. Dao Yi smiled and said, It's good to have a companion. Moreover, we can learn from each other. Yi Xian thought for a moment and nodded. Then I'll accompany you for a while. The corner of Dao Yi's mouth lifted. Good. Yi Xian looked at Gu Qing. I'm in. Gu Qing glanced at Yi Xian. Both of you follow me. With that he turned and left. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something, and turned to look at Old Li. With a tap of his finger, a storage ring appeared before Old Li. Old Li took the storage ring, and looked inside. There were a total of 100,000 eternal life immortal crystals. Old Li looked at Yi Xian in astonishment. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't rob in the future. With that he turned and walked away with Dao Yi. Old Li was silent for a long time before he shook his head and left. When they saw Yi Xian and Dao Yi entering the Great Spiritual God Palace, the people outside the door were furious. Through the back door, the Great Spiritual God Palace also had such shady operations. Many people protested on the spot. That person is only at the heaven ascension state. How can he enter the Great Spiritual God Palace? Why? If he can enter, why can't I? Why? In front of the door, a young man glared angrily at the back of Yi Xian, and the other two leaving. He clenched his fists and said, Shady operations. The Great Spiritual God Palace actually has such shady operations. How shameful. I won't enter this Great Spiritual God Palace. Another person beside the young man said abruptly, Brother, you seem to have been eliminated, right? The young man was instantly enraged. None of your goddamn business. That person. More and more people were discussing in front of the door. Through the back door. This was obviously shameful. This was because the Great Spiritual God Palace was very strict in their recruitment. It could be said that they might not even get one in a month. This month, he had only recruited 2 people. They were Yi Xian and Dao Yi. The rest of the people were eliminated. Therefore, the people in front of the door were furious. Someone actually went through the back door. This was simply too unfair. Things were getting out of hand. It didn't take long for the news to reach the Great Spiritual God Palace. Under Gu Qing's lead, Yi Xian and Dao Yi arrived at the top of a mountain. This was the Great Spiritual God Palace's Lingxiu Mountain, the place where the outer disciples lived. Needless to say, Yi Xian was quite shocked. Along the way, the weakest person in the entire Great Spiritual God Palace was at the Heaven Ascension state. And it was this Heaven Ascension stage that also had a vigorous aura, the kind that did not have any excess. There really wasn't a single weakling. At this moment he thought of the small cave. The small cave was as famous as the great spiritual god palace. So it definitely wouldn't be weaker than the great spiritual god palace. It seemed like he was boasting a little too much when he said that he could face the great spiritual god palace. Gu Qing brought Yi Xian and Dao Yi to a courtyard and said, "You will live here from now on." Saying this, he turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Elder Gu." Gu Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Can you tell me why you accepted me?" Gu Qing said, "Instantly killing a mortal severing state cultivator, while at the heaven ascension state. He is not an ordinary genius." Saying this, he turned and left. Yi Xian was silent. Evidently, the great spiritual god palace already knew that he had killed people on the street. In other words, the great spiritual god palace also knew that he had the divine level spring of eternal life. At this moment, Dao Yi suddenly said, "Are you worried about something?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Nothing." Saying this, he looked around. "I have to say the scenery of Lingxiu Mountain is not bad. It just so happens that I also need to cultivate for a while. Cultivate to the heaven ascension state." He also wanted to be like Qing and cultivate to the heaven ascension state to the limit. After Qing Er's guidance, he realized that it was only meaningful to cultivate to the limit of a state. If he cultivated to the limit of the heaven ascension state, forget about the space-time state. Even a minor saint would not be a match for him. Any matter, even if it was a small matter, as long as it was cultivated to the limit, it would be very terrifying. Dao Yi smiled and said, "I will go for a walk and cultivate." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." Dao Yi turned and left, while Yi Xian came to the courtyard. He sat cross-legged on the ground, placed his hands on his knees and slowly closed his eyes. Soon, a river of time appeared in front of him. This was a miniature version. In the following time, Yi Xian began to study this dimension of time. The basis of his research was that time and space were inseparable. In other words, he focused on combining time and space, and not solely studying the power of time. At this moment, he still did not know that the matter of him joining the great spiritual god palace had already spread like wildfire within the great spiritual god palace. Lingxiu Palace. This was the place where the outer sect elders discussed matters. At this moment, there were 3 outer sect elders gathered in the palace. Gu Qing was among them. The leading outer sect elder looked at Gu Qing. "The matter has become very big." Gu Qing said indifferently, "Let them be." The outer sect elder said in a low voice, "It is not difficult for an ascension heaven state to kill a transcendence state. At least in our outer sect, there are definitely many who can do it." Gu Qing said, "He killed him in an instant and very casually." The outer sect elder fell silent. Casually killing a transcendence realm expert. Needless to say, this was slightly difficult. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man by the outer sect elder's side suddenly smiled and said, "According to my investigation, this person has a divine rank spring of eternal life on him, and he calls himself the young ruler of the Sky Demon Kingdom." Gu Qing said indifferently, "Our great spiritual god palace never looks at a person's background when we recruit them, right?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "Gu Qing, I have no other intentions. This person is extraordinary indeed, but his background is slightly mysterious, and I'm afraid his intentions are not pure." Gu Qing was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Ji Lin, we need someone who can stand out. Otherwise we'll be forgotten soon." The expressions of the 3 people in the palace became unsightly when they heard this. Actually, outsiders didn't know that the outer sect was in an extremely difficult situation right now, because it had been almost 50 years since an outer sect disciple had been promoted to inner sect disciple. Why? Because they didn't have the qualifications. It was very difficult for outsiders to join the great spiritual god palace. But outsiders didn't know that it was as difficult as ascending the heavens for an outer sect disciple to join the inner sect. 50 years. For an entire 50 years, not a single disciple from Beauty Peak had been able to join the inner court. As for Li Yaoya, he directly skipped the outer court, inner court, and elite disciples to become the palace master's personal disciple. That couldn't be considered as an outer sect disciple at all. So the outer court was in an extremely awkward situation right now. Not only were they in an awkward situation, but they were also in an awkward situation in terms of resources. Because the resources given to the outer court had started to decrease every year. They felt that there was no need for outer court disciples to enjoy so many resources. Besides that, the treatment of the outer court elders was declining as well, and it was decreasing year by year. Of course, the most intolerable thing to them was the problem of face. During the annual sect gathering, the outer court elders and outer court disciples were the most humiliated. They were like outsiders. It was too embarrassing. They couldn't tolerate it. Meanwhile, the outer court elder suddenly said, "Can he do it?" Gu Qing spoke in a low voice. "His aura is deep, and he's neither servile nor overbearing when facing me. Moreover, he doesn't show any respect to our great spiritual God palace. His background is definitely not ordinary. Of course, we don't have to care about that. What I want to say is that he's definitely hiding his strength. As for whether or not he can pass the inner court assessment, I can't guarantee it, but I think he has a chance." The elder suddenly said, "I'll go test him. If he can pass, then we'll do our best to nurture him. After all, there's less than 3 months before the inner court assessment." After saying that, he disappeared. Gu Qing and Ji Lin also disappeared on the spot. In the courtyard, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, still studying his time dimension. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared not far away. The man had a weed in his mouth, and his arms were crossed, looking a little sloppy. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the man. "What's the matter?" The man looked at Yi Xian. "You're the Yi Xian who came in through the back door?" "Through the back door?" Yi Xian was stunned, then smiled. "I never go through the back door. I usually go through the front door." Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, you're really perverted." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Xiao Ta said, "Nothing, Yi Xian." At this moment, the man not far away suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian and sneered. "You actually came in through the back door. I despise people like you the most." Yi Xian said indifferently, "I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Hurry up and get lost." The man suddenly laughed sinisterly. "Deng Tianzai, do you dare to go to the life and death ring with me? Let's fight to the death." Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The man's face changed drastically. He was about to attack when a sword directly pressed against his forehead. The man was stunned. Yi Xian looked at the man and smiled. "Go to the life and death ring? Fight to the death." The man's throat rolled, then he said, "Big brother, you're so strong?" Yi Xian blinked. "Yes. Are you surprised? Are you pleasantly surprised?" The man hesitated and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were so strong." Yi Xian said, "Aren't we going to the life and death ring? Let's go." The man hurriedly shook his head. "Big brother, it's my fault. I didn't know you were so strong. You didn't go through the back door. You went through the front door." Xiao Ta suddenly said, "You're both perverts." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Xiao Ta, what are you talking about? How are you perverts?" Xiao Ta did not speak. Chapter 1772. Yi Xian really did not understand. How was this abnormal? What did this Xiao Ta mean? Xiao Ta did not speak again. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, the 3 outer court elders appeared on the scene. Seeing the 3 outer court elders, the man in front of Yi Xian suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. In that moment, he felt Yi Xian's killing intent. The outer court elder glanced at the man. "Go do what you need to do." The man hurriedly bowed, then turned and ran away. Yi Xian looked at the 3 outer court elders, not saying a word. The grand elder of the outer clan sized Yi Xian up. "You hid your strength." Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No. I am of the Heaven Ascension boundary." The outer court elder smiled. "You are of the Heaven Ascension boundary, but your battle power far exceeds the Heaven Ascension boundary." Yi Xian said with a smile. "Elder, I'm a straightforward person. Why don't we be frank? Is that okay?" The outer court elder nodded. "Okay." Yi Xian looked straight at the outer court elder. "Why did you accept me into the great spiritual God palace?" The outer court elder smiled. "Because you are monstrous enough. Yi Xian frowned. That's it. The outer court elder nodded. I know you may think that we are after your divine level spring of eternal life, right? Yi Xian nodded. I have thought so. The outer court elder smiled. Don't worry, we are not too interested in your divine level spring of eternal life. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The outer court elder said. You can have this thing, and dare to expose it. This proves that you are not an ordinary person. Moreover, even if this thing is in the hands of the three of us cannot keep it. Yi Xian smiled. Then what do you want from me? The outer court elder said in a deep voice. Your talent and strength. Yi Xian frowned. I still don't understand. Meanwhile, Gu Qing suddenly said. We want you to join the inner court. Yi Xian blinked. Join the inner sect? Gu Qing nodded. It has been more than 50 years since anyone from the outer court was able to join the inner court. Now the upper echelons reduce the benefits of the outer court every year. If no one is able to join the inner court, our outer court will really be finished. Yi Xian looked at Gu Qing. Just because of this. Gu Qing nodded. Right here. Yi Xian smiled and said, What benefits do I get? Benefits? The three of them had strange expressions on their faces. This fellow was asking for benefits. Gu Qing hesitated for a moment before he said, You'll be able to obtain even more cultivation resources if you join the inner court. Yi Xian smiled and said, Do you think I lack cultivation resources? The three of them were speechless. This guy had a divine level spring of eternal life with him, so he definitely wouldn't lack any cultivation resources. Yi Xian suddenly said, If there are no benefits, then I'm leaving. With that, he turned around and left. Actually, he had wanted to leave since a long time ago. He didn't want to be involved in the quarrels of the great spiritual palace. At this moment, Gu Qing suddenly said, Wait. Yi Xian turned around to look at Gu Qing. Gu Qing said solemnly, Don't you want to see the super geniuses and geniuses of this world? Yi Xian fell silent. Gu Qing continued, The inner court is filled with monstrous geniuses. Don't you want to see them? Yi Xian glanced at Gu Qing. How monstrous? Gu Qing smiled and said, The weakest in the inner court is the mortal severing realm, and they can basically kill mortal severing realm experts from the outside world. The top two can even kill space-time realms, and the true disciples above the inner court are even more terrifying. Yi Xian asked, How terrifying? Gu Qing smiled slightly. Have you heard of Li Yaoya? Yi Xian nodded. It's said that he's the most monstrous genius in the history of the great spiritual palace. Gu Qing nodded slightly. He reached the minor saint level before the age of 20, and now, no one knows what level he has reached. His strength is like the vast starry sky of the universe, unfathomable. At this moment, the outer court grand elder also said, It's not just Li Yaoya. None of the true disciples are weak. They're all monstrous geniuses. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Are you interested in seeing them? Yi Xian smiled and said, Yes. Actually, the reason he came to the ancient god galaxy this time was to see the most monstrous geniuses in this universe. His father had said that there were peak elites of the current realm in this place. Of course, he wanted to see them. He had never felt that he was the strongest among the younger generation, because he knew that there was always someone better than him. There was no such thing as the strongest, only stronger. Of course, he was not afraid of anyone from the younger generation. Hearing Yi Xian agree, the outer court grand elder, and the other two elders all smiled, although they did not know how strong Yi Xian was. Since Yi Xian dared to agree, he must have some tricks up his sleeves. At this moment, the grand elder suddenly smiled and said, There are 3 months until the inner court assessment, so we only have 3 months. Within these 3 months, we will find a way to help you reach the mortal severing realm. However, Yi Xian shook his head. I don't cultivate my realm. He didn't cultivate his realm. The three of them were a little confused. Yi Xian smiled and said, I don't care about my realm. Jilin was about to say something when Gu Qing suddenly said, Sure. Jilin looked at Gu Qing. Gu Qing smiled and said, In these 3 months, tell us what you want. As long as it's within our capabilities, we will try our best to satisfy you. Yi Xian nodded. I need a quiet place to cultivate now. Gu Qing said, Follow me. As he spoke, he waved his right hand and disappeared with Yi Xian. When they reappeared, the two of them were already in a starry sky. Yi Xian looked around. The starry sky around him was deep and endless. Gu Qing smiled and said, "This is the starry sky cultivation ground that my great spiritual palace has opened up. Each starry sky is a separate spacetime starfield. Moreover, they are all dead starfields. You can destroy them however you want to cultivate. Not only that, every cultivation starfield is equipped with a spirit vein. Some of the cultivation starfields of true disciples are even equipped with several sacred-level eternal springs. That kind of cultivation is truly terrifying." Yi Xian said softly, "Impressive. There should be many people who want to become true disciples, right?" Gu Qing nodded. "Super many people. As long as you become a true disciple, you will get unimaginable cultivation resources. As far as I know, becoming a true disciple will not only allow you to cultivate in a starry sky, but you will also have many privileges. For example, they can receive an advance payment of eternal divine crystals from the sect every year. They can also enter the deity martial pavilion to read the cultivation notes of countless experts. Most importantly, they can mobilize a certain number of experts from the sect to serve them. Apart from that, they also have many hidden privileges." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "They can mobilize the experts of the Great Spiritual Palace?" Gu Qing nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was curious. "How many true disciples are there in total?" Gu Qing said, 6. Yi Xian was stunned. 6. So few. Gu Qing smiled bitterly. Not everyone can become a true disciple. The difficulty of becoming a true disciple is too terrifying. If you have the chance to come into contact with them in the future, you will know how terrifying it is. True disciple. Yi Xian nodded. In fact, he was also shocked. He realized that he had underestimated the great spiritual palace. As expected of an ancient super force, this was the real stage. Gu Qing suddenly said, "This is my starry cultivation ground. Although it's not that good, I can make do with it. During this period you can cultivate here. Don't worry, no one will disturb you. However, you must remember that the inner sect assessment is in 3 months. You must come." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Gu Qing nodded. "I won't disturb you anymore. Cultivate well, and call me if you need anything." Having said that, he turned and disappeared. Yi Xian looked around and waved his sleeves. In an instant, 4 time-dimensional rivers appeared in front of him. The current him could already condense 4 time-dimensional rivers. Although it wasn't much, he had slowly grasped some of the core things. This also made him sure that he could do it without limit. Exquisite peak. The great elder of the outer sect looked at Gu Qing. "Did you find out his background?" Gu Qing shook his head. "No." Although he said he was the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom, the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom is a woman, so it's not him. As for his name, I don't know if it's a fake name or something. I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. The great elder's face darkened, and he didn't say anything. Someone that even the great spiritual palace couldn't find out was not simple. Actually, he didn't know that it was purely because Yi Xian was too far away. At this moment, Jilin suddenly said, "Forget about that. Anyway, he's a member of the great spiritual palace now. Moreover, he's a swordsman. Based on this, we don't need to worry about anything." Swordsmen. Although there were bad swordsmen, they were really rare. Normally, swordsmen were people of good character. After all, as a swordsman, the most important thing was to have a clear conscience and never forget their original intentions. The great elder of the outer sect nodded. "That's true." As he spoke, he looked at Jilin. "What about Li Shuran?" Jilin said in a low voice. "He's reached the mortal severing realm. However, his realm isn't very stable, so he's now stabilizing his realm." Mortal severing realm. The great elder of the outer sect nodded slightly. "Our outer sect can only send him, and this Yi Xian," Gu Qing said softly. "If no one else enters the inner sect this time, then our outer sect." At this point, he didn't say anything else. The expressions of the 3 of them became even more serious. Small grotto heaven. In front of a bamboo house, An old man sat beside a small river. His eyes were slightly closed, and he held a fishing rod in his hand. At this moment, a black-robed man suddenly appeared in front of the old man. The black-robed man bowed slightly. "Cave Master, we've searched all over the heavens and realms, but we haven't found that plain-dressed lady." After a long silence, the old man said, "Continue searching. If she's alive, I want to see her. If she's dead, I want to see her corpse." P.S. Working hard to save chapters. I'm so envious of my younger days. At that time, I could write at least 5 to 6 chapters a day. Now sigh. Chapter 1773. The Woman in a Plain Dress. The small grotto heaven had lost 2 super experts this time. A half-step sage and a prospective sage. Li Xianqing was a prospective sage. He was invincible in the space-time realm. It would be too easy for Li Xianqing to become a sage in the future. But now he was killed. Not only was he killed, but his master was also killed. This was equivalent to declaring war on the small grotto heaven. Suddenly, the man in black said, "Cave Master, I'm afraid that woman is at least a great sage." At least a sage. The old man was expressionless. So what if she's a great sage? The small grotto heaven was not afraid of a great sage. The small grotto heaven had a great sage-level super expert. Apart from that, the ancestor of the small grotto heaven was related to the supreme law of this universe. With this relationship, even the ancient god galaxy and the sky monster kingdom had to be wary of the small grotto heaven, the supreme law of the universe. Who would not be wary of it? The old man said again, "Continue to search. We must find her." The man in black nodded. "Our people are trying their best to find this person." As he spoke, he paused and said, "Yi Xian has already joined the Great Spiritual God Palace." The Great Spiritual Palace. The old man frowned. He joined the Great Spiritual Palace? The man in black nodded. "This person has a close relationship with the woman in a plain dress. If we can capture this person, we will definitely know the whereabouts of the woman in a plain dress. However, this person has joined the Great Spiritual Palace, so it's not good for us to capture him." Although the small grotto heaven was not afraid of the Great Spiritual Palace, it was the territory of the Great Spiritual Palace. They did not dare to capture people in the Great Spiritual Palace. This could easily lead to a war. After a long silence, the old man said, "He will come out eventually." The man in black nodded. "Understood." After saying that, he quietly disappeared. By the river, the old man closed his eyes slowly. "Those who offend my small grotto heaven will be killed no matter how far they are." At the cultivation ground in the galaxy, Yi Xian was able to condense 10 time-dimensional rivers. Right now he had already grasped some methods. The most important thing was that time and space had to be combined. The quality and quantity of his time-dimensional river far surpassed what it had been in the past. He had a better understanding of the time-dimensional rivers, and the more he understood, the easier it would be to break. It was worth mentioning that his current sword-drawing technique could already be stacked 380 times. He actually wanted to try the sword-drawing technique with the mysterious green sword, but he didn't dare to, because even he himself did not know how terrifying that might was. In fact, just the power of the Xianqing sword was already very, very terrifying. He didn't even dare to casually use the profound green sword. This sword was too terrifying. He was afraid that he would be too powerful. Time slowly passed. About 2 months later, Dao Yi suddenly arrived at the starry sky cultivation place where Yi Xian was. Yi Xian stopped and looked at Dao Yi. Dao Yi smiled and said, "Let's go out for a walk." Yi Xian blinked. "Shall we go out for a walk?" Dao Yi nodded. "I heard that an inner court elder is going to give a lecture. Are you interested?" Yi Xian shook his head. "Not interested." Dao Yi rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. "Just treat it as keeping me company." Yi Xian smiled. "Then I'm interested." Dao Yi shook his head and smiled. He was very happy. The two of them left the starry sky cultivation place and came to a huge training ground. The training ground was nearly 1,000 feet wide and extremely spacious. At that moment, there were many outer court disciples gathered at the training ground. There were hundreds of them. Yi Xian glanced at those outer court disciples and said softly, "These people are all very good." Dao Yi nodded. Those who could become outer court disciples were not weak. In the outside world, they would definitely be geniuses among geniuses. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Dao Yi, where are Ming and the others?" Dao Yi said softly, "They want to stay in the bamboo house by the lake." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." Obviously, Ming and the others still could not let go of God Yi. Dao Yi glanced at Yi Xian. "They don't hate you." "No, they never hated you." Yi Xian smiled. "That's good." Dao Yi was about to speak when a voice suddenly came from afar. "Damn, the backdoor guy is here." Backdoor guy. As soon as these words were spoken, all the outer court disciples present here looked at Yi Xian in succession. Backdoor. When they saw Yi Xian, many of the outer clan disciples revealed looks of disdain. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Yi. "Did we get in through the back door?" Dao Yi thought about it and said, "They might be talking about you, not me." Yi Xian was speechless. Dao Yi smiled. "Ignore them." Yi Xian nodded. Meanwhile, a man suddenly walked over to Yi Xian and Dao Yi, and he gazed at Yi Xian. "You're not worthy of standing with us." Yi Xian said with a smile. "Then get lost." As soon as he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped the man. Slap. The man wasn't even able to react before his figure was blasted flying. In the end, he crashed heavily onto the ground in the distance, and the entire ground exploded apart. Everyone was stunned. How could he attack just like that? Yi Xian glanced at the outer court disciples, and then he smiled. "Do all of you have any more questions?" The outer court disciples gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of vigilance in their eyes. The man that Yi Xian slapped flying just now wasn't weak, but he didn't even have the ability to fight back. Obviously, Yi Xian was strong. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything else when they remained silent. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly appeared not too far away from them. The expressions of the outer court disciples changed slightly when they saw the old man, and then they hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, elder." An elder of the inner court. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. Needless to say, the old man's aura was much stronger than Gu Qing's group of three. The old man didn't even spare a glance at them. He just sat down cross-legged and withdrew an ancient book. The Tao of Martial begins with the ancient gods. The outer court disciples hurriedly sat down and listened attentively. Yi Xian and Dao Yi sat down as well. In the beginning, Yi Xian didn't pay much attention to it, but it didn't take long for him to start listening attentively. Needless to say, the old man's lecture was really good, especially some of the basic principles of the martial Tao. He explained them in great detail. The outer court disciples listened very attentively as well, because such an opportunity only came once every 3 months. In the past, it used to be once a month, but along with the decline of the outer court, it had been reduced to once every 3 months, and it might be even longer in the future. Around an hour later, the old man suddenly put the book away, stood up, and was about to leave. Meanwhile, an outer court disciple spoke abruptly. "Elder, please wait." The old man gazed at that outer court disciple. That outer court disciple bowed slightly. "Elder, there's something I don't understand. You said that the Tao of Martial is distinguished by the divine." The old man suddenly interrupted that outer court disciple, and his expression was cold and indifferent. "These are all basic questions. I don't want to waste too much time answering them." That outer court disciple's expression instantly became quite unsightly when he heard this. Or it should be said that all the outer court disciples here had unsightly expressions as well. The inner court elder seemed like he was giving them alms by coming here to teach them. The inner court elder didn't speak another word, and he just turned around and vanished on the spot. The expressions of all the outer court disciples grew even more unsightly. The old man didn't take them seriously at all. Meanwhile, Gu Qing suddenly appeared here, and he glanced at them. "Do you know why he disrespected all of you?" All of them shook their heads. Gu Qing gazed at them. "Because he's from the inner court while all of you are from the outer court. If they weren't on an assignment, then they wouldn't have come to the outer court to teach all of you." One of the outer court disciples spoke solemnly. "Elder, we're all from the Great Spirit Divine Palace." Gu Qing gazed at that outer court disciple and said, "You're right. We're all from the Great Spirit Divine Palace, but the Great Spirit Divine Palace is divided into the outer court and inner court as well. Moreover, it isn't just the Great Spirit Divine Palace. Only the strong are respected everywhere in the universe. If all of you want to obtain their respect, then enter the inner court. Only by entering the inner court would they respect all of you. Enter the inner court. The expressions of the outer court disciples grew even more unsightly when they heard this, because it was truly too difficult to enter the inner court. Many of them were on the verge of despair. It was even to the extent that they felt that it was utterly impossible. Gu Qing suddenly said, Yi Xian, Li Xiuran, and Dao Yi stay behind. The rest can disperse. The outer court disciples glanced at each other when they heard this, and then they dispersed. Only Gu Qing, Li Xiuran, Yi Xian, and Dao Yi remained on the training grounds. Gu Qing glanced at Li Xiuran and Yi Xian. Are you confident? Li Xiuran replied, 60%. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian asked, Are you talking about joining the inner court? Gu Qing nodded. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Is it really very difficult to join the inner court? Gu Qing nodded. It's extraordinarily difficult. Yi Xian smiled. We'll give it a try when the time comes. Gu Qing glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. All of you will come with me to Glittering Jade Pavilion later. Li Xiuran was visibly moved. Glittering Jade Pavilion? Gu Qing nodded. We begged for a long time in order to obtain 3 positions. Yi Xian was suddenly curious. What sort of place is Glittering Jade Pavilion? Li Xiuran glanced at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, you don't seem to know anything. Yi Xian smiled. It's my first time here. Li Xiuran nodded lightly. Glittering Jade Pavilion is a very special place, and it was established by an elite disciple of our Grand Spiritual Palace. There's a gathering every year, but only the top monstrous geniuses are qualified to participate. Even if you're an inner court disciple, not just anyone can participate. Only those who are invited can participate. Yi Xian asked, What do we do there? Li Xiuran smiled. Drink tea, discuss the Tao, and make friends with all the geniuses in the world. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Gu Qing smiled. All of you can go see the world. Li Xiuran hesitated for a moment, and then he said, The 3 of us definitely don't have the qualifications to be invited. Elder Yu, Gu Qing said with a smile. We shamelessly begged our respective masters for this. All of you must properly cherish this opportunity. If you're able to make friends with some inner court disciples, that would be even better. Yi Xian sighed lightly in his heart. The outer court is really too miserable. Chapter 1774. Outer Court. Yi Xian did not expect the outer court to be so miserable. Although they were all from the Great Spiritual Palace, the outer court did not seem to have any status in the Great Spiritual Palace. Gu Qing suddenly said, Get ready and head to Linlang Pavilion. Li Xiuran nodded. All right. With that, he glanced at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, Miss Dao Yi, we will meet at the mountain gate later. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Li Xiuran turned and left. Yi Xian turned and looked at Gu Qing. Elder Gu Qing, why is the outer court status so low in the Great Spiritual Palace? Is it because the outer court is weak now? But if that's the case, it shouldn't be. The outer court recruits those who have just joined the sect, and their strength is weak. This is understandable. Gu Qing smiled bitterly. Actually, it wasn't like this in the past. The main reason is that no one from the outer court passed the inner court assessment and was promoted to inner court disciple. For the past 50 years, there has been a gap between the 2 sides. Therefore, over time, the inner court disciples looked down on the outer court disciples. To be precise, the previous generation's demon-like geniuses looked down on the current generation's demon-like geniuses and felt that the current generation's demon-like geniuses are weak. Yi Xian frowned. Why has no one been promoted to the inner court for the past 50 years? Has the assessment become stricter? Gu Qing shook his head. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Then why is it so miserable? Gu Qing smiled bitterly. We don't know either. We have tried our best to nurture those who have been recruited, but no one has been able to pass the assessment. But now the benefits of the outer sect were getting fewer and fewer. To the outer sect, it could be said to be one disaster after another. If no one is able to enter the inner court this year, the outer court situation will be even more difficult. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Gu Qing hesitated for a while and asked, Are you confident? Yi Xian smiled. You will know when the time comes. Gu Qing nodded and did not ask any more questions. An hour later, Yi Xian and Dao Yi arrived at the entrance of the mountain. At this moment, Li Xiran was already waiting for them. Li Xiran smiled. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. The three of them headed for Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Glittering Jewels Pavilion wasn't in Ancient God City, but in a starry sky outside Ancient God City. Li Xiran suddenly said, Brother Yi should know very little about Glittering Jewels Pavilion, right? Yi Xian nodded. This is the first time I've heard of it. Li Xiaoran smiled and said, This Linlang Pavilion was built by Miss Xiao Linlang. Brother Yi, do you know Xiao Linlang? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Li Xiran laughed. Brother Yi, why don't you know anything? Yi Xian smiled and said, This is my first time here. Speaking of which, is this Xiao Linlang very powerful? At this moment, the afterimage that Yi Xian slashed away disappeared without a sound. There was no longer any aura around. Since his attack failed, he immediately fled. Yi Xian frowned. Who was it? Was it someone who came to steal the divine level spring of eternal life? Or a small cave? Or the Sky Demon Kingdom? Sky Demon Kingdom was unlikely. The number of people killed by Qing should be enough to deter the Sky Demon Kingdom. As for this small cave, he could not rule out the possibility that the other party was here to seek revenge. At this moment, Li Xiaoran suddenly said, Brother Yi, do you know who it is? Yi Xian shook his head. Forget it. He was a little careless just now. After slashing away with his sword, he did not immediately attack again. In fact, he wanted to keep his life. But he did not expect the other party to be so fast and flee. Li Xiaoran said solemnly, Should we return to the great spiritual god palace and inform Elder Gu Qing and the rest? Yi Xian smiled. Forget it. I'll deal with it myself. Li Xiaoran hesitated then nodded. All right. Yi Xian said, Let's go to Linlang Pavilion. Not long after the three of them left, a black shadow suddenly appeared. After a moment of silence, the black shadow said, He is so strong. It's so. At this moment, a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. Qi. The black shadow froze on the spot. Yi Xian appeared again, the corner of his mouth raised. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? At this moment, the black shadow suddenly became illusory. Self-destruct. Seeing this, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Self-destruct directly. Yi Xian looked at the shadow. You are from the small cave world. The black shadow's right hand trembled slightly, and this small movement was noticed by Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, You really are from the small cave world. At this moment, the black shadow had completely disappeared. A mortal severing stage assassin. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then shook his head. You are looking down on me too much. With his current strength, let alone a mortal severing stage, he could even kill a space-time stage. Moreover, he did not even need to use the green profound sword. After a moment, Yi Xian turned and left. Glittering Jewels Pavilion was located in the middle of a lake, and the entire pavilion was built in the middle of the lake. It was very big and very exquisite. The pavilion was built with crystals, and if it was night, under the illumination of the starlight and moonlight, the entire pavilion would be even more colorful. It was extremely beautiful, like a celestial palace. When Yi Xian and the other two arrived at the entrance of Glittering Jewels Pavilion, a woman appeared in front of them. The woman wore a white dress, and her features were peerless, with a faint smile on her face. The woman smiled faintly. 3 guests, please show me your invitation cards. Yi Xian and the other two took out their invitation. When she saw their invitation, a strange look flashed across the woman's eyes. She did not say much, and returned the invitation to the 3, then said with a smile, Please enter the pavilion. Li Xiran cupped his fists. Thank you. The 3 entered Glittering Jewels Pavilion. After entering, Yi Xian and the other two were a little surprised. Glittering Jewels Pavilion was different from the outside. The decorations inside Glittering Jewels Pavilion were very simple and not luxurious at all. Compared to the outside, it was a world of difference. At this moment, Li Xiaoran suddenly laughed. I wonder if Miss Linling will come this time. And that Li Yaoya. Yi Xian looked at Li Xiaoran. Didn't Miss Linling come to previous gatherings? Li Xiaoran laughed. Not necessarily. Sometimes she will appear, but sometimes she won't. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and he looked around. The entire pavilion was very spacious, and in the center of the pavilion, there was a huge round platform, and around the round platform were some praying mats. Li Xiaoran said, This should be the place where the Tao discussion will be held later. As he spoke, he looked into the distance. Let's go to the cabinet. I heard that there are many display platforms in the cabinet. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The three arrived at the cabinet, which was relatively small. Inside the pavilion, there were about 100 crystal display platforms, and inside, there were divine items and some scrolls. Li Xiaoran suddenly walked in front of a crystal platform, and his expression suddenly turned solemn. Ancient Desolation Fist. Yi Xian walked to Li Xiaoran's side, and he took a glance at the crystal platform, and at the bottom of the crystal platform, there were 3 big words. Ancient Desolation Fist. Yi Xian looked at Li Xiaoran, and Li Xiaoran said in a deep voice, It's a sacred rank martial technique. Yi Xian frowned. Sacred rank. Li Xiaoran nodded. Martial techniques are divided into 5 types, from low to high. They are void rank, truth rank, sacred rank, god rank and ancient god rank. Sacred rank martial techniques and mental cultivation methods, even in the great spiritual god palace, are very precious. Only a few core disciples of the inner sect are qualified to learn them. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and he looked around. Finally, he came to the crystal pillar in the center, but just as he was about to approach, he was blocked by an invisible force. There's a formation. Yi Xian took a glance at the crystal pillar, and at the bottom, there were 2 big words, sword extinction, sword technique. Moreover, it was a god-rank sword technique. Yi Xian was instantly interested. Yi Xian turned his head to look at Li Xiaoran, and said with a smile, Brother Li, how do I obtain this god-rank sword technique? Li Xiaoran took a look at the crystal platform in front of Yi Xian, and then smiled bitterly. Brother Yi, I'm afraid you can't afford this. To obtain this item, you must exchange it with a sword technique of the same level. Yi Xian was about to speak, when at this time, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. Heaven Ascension Stage? Yi Xian turned to look, and not far away, a man was looking at him. The man looked at Yi Xian, his brows slightly wrinkled. A Heaven Ascension Stage can also enter Glittering Jewels Pavilion? What a joke! Yi Xian was about to speak, when at this time, the man suddenly said, Your outer sect disciples. Outer sect disciples. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The man stared at Yi Xian. You don't have the qualifications to be invited. As he spoke, a cold light flashed in his eyes. How dare you? You dare to forge an invitation letter. P.S. Regarding updates, I have a great plan. Chapter 1775. Forged Invitation Letters. His words immediately attracted the attention of some people in Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Yi Xian glanced at the man. This man was also from the great spiritual divine palace. However, he was obviously from the inner court. At this moment, a woman slowly walked into the inner court. It was the woman who had received Yi Xian's group earlier. The man quickly said, Miss Imo came at the right time. These 3 forged invitation letters to sneak into Glittering Jewels Pavilion. They deserve to die. Imo glanced at the man. Young Master Wang Xiu, they forged invitation letters? The man named Wang Xiu nodded. Yes. They are all outer court disciples of great spiritual god palace. They are not qualified to enter Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Their invitation letters must be forged. Imo looked at Yi Xian's group. Yi Xian looked at Wang Xiu and smiled. Brother Wang, we are all from great spiritual god palace. Why do you have to do this? Wang Xiu flicked his sleeves and a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Your outer court is a disgrace. Do you think you are from Great Spiritual God Palace? Yi Xian suddenly asked. Not from Great Spiritual God Palace? Then what is it? Could it be from Battle Pavilion? Wang Xiu's expression froze. Yi Xian said seriously. Brother Wang, your thinking is dangerous. You don't even admit that the outer court belongs to Great Spiritual God Palace. Wang Xiu stared at Yi Xian and mocked. What? Are you outer court disciples only good at talking? Yi Xian said with a smile. I think both the inner and outer sects belong to the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. Well said. At this moment a man suddenly applauded. Well said, sir. Yi Xian looked at the man and the man smiled. I am an inner court disciple, Mo Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Hello, brother Mo. Mo Yi smiled and looked at Wang Xiu. Brother Wang, regardless of whether they are outer disciples or inner disciples, they are all from the Great Spiritual Palace. Since they are all from the Great Spiritual Palace, let's forget about this matter. Wang Xiu sneered. Forget it? Mo Yi, I admit that the outer sect is also part of the Great Spiritual God Palace. But forgive me for being blunt. Do the two of them have the qualifications to enter the Glittering Jewels Pavilion? Yi Xian smiled and said, Is it up to you to decide whether I'm qualified or not? Wang Xiu stared at Yi Xian. Outer sect, you're so arrogant. Yi Xian blinked and said with a smile, This is arrogance? Haha. Meanwhile, Li Xiuran, who stood by Yi Xian's side, hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior brother Yi Xian, we didn't forge any invitations. Our invitations were sent by Master. As soon as these words were spoken, an uproar arose in the surroundings. Yi Xian also shook his head and sighed. This brother Li's brain was still a little too simple. The three of their invitation letters were originally a little unorthodox. After all, the exquisite Jade Pavilion did not invite the three of them. And who was the one checking the invitation cards outside? It was none other than Missy Mo. Wang Xiu still dared to say that their invitations were forged after seeing Missy Mo. He was either an idiot or had ulterior motives. Meanwhile, Wang Xiu suddenly smiled and said, So it was your master who asked for it on your behalf. I understand. Haha. Li Xiuran instantly became slightly embarrassed when he heard this. On the other hand, the expressions of the others here became slightly strange as well. Actually, it wasn't that something like this had never happened before. For the sake of creating opportunities for their descendants, the older generation would use their connections to obtain an invitation card and then give it to their descendants. However, such things were tacitly understood. At this moment, Wang Xiu had directly brought this matter out in the open, and he was intentionally humiliating Yi Xian's group of three. Wang Xiu suddenly gazed at Yi Xian and said, You're at the Heaven Ascension realm. If I'm not wrong, then you're Yi Xian who just joined the outer court, right? Yi Xian smiled and said, That's me. Wang Xiu smiled and said, So you're Yi Xian who entered the outer court from the back. As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and continued, All of you might not be aware, but he originally didn't have the qualifications to join the outer court. However, he used his connections to enter the outer court. I'm not humiliating a fellow disciple for no reason today, but I, Wang Xiu, can't bear the sight of people who use their connections to enter the outer court. Some people gazed at Yi Xian with slightly strange gazes when they heard this. He entered the outer court through the back door. Mo Yi glanced at Yi Xian, and he hesitated for a moment, but didn't say anything in the end. Actually, he'd heard about what happened to Yi Xian as well. It seemed like he really did enter through the back door. Such behavior was quite shameful. Meanwhile, Li Xiuran suddenly spoke in a low voice. Wang Xiu, with Brother Ye's strength, he's completely qualified to enter the outer court. He didn't enter through the back door at all. He'd seen Yi Xian fight earlier, so he was aware of Yi Xian's strength. Wang Xiu smiled and said, He didn't enter through the back door? Then tell me, a Heaven Ascension realm cultivator like him was actually able to join the outer court? As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. No wonder your outer court has declined to such an extent. So it turns out that your outer court has become so corrupt. Truly shameful. Li Xiuran was slightly furious. He wanted to say something, but was stopped by Yi Xian. Li Xiao looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian smiled and said, "Brotherly, let me deal with such a person." As he spoke, he looked at Wang Xiao and smiled. "So your main objective today was to target me?" He was extremely fearful of Yi Xian's strike from before, because he didn't have the confidence to receive it. At this moment, the atmosphere suddenly became slightly awkward. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Everyone, let's get back to the topic at hand. Wang Xiao slandered me by going through the back door." As he spoke, he grinned. "I'm sure all of you know whether I did or not. As for Wang Xiao, all of you saw him just now. First he humiliated me, then he asked me to hit him. Alas, it's truly the first time I, Yi Xian, have heard such a request in my entire life. It's true." All of them were speechless. Suddenly, laughter resounded from outside. "You killed him, yet you still want to destroy his heart. How interesting." As soon as the voice resounded, a man walked in. Someone exclaimed with surprise as soon as the man walked in. "The sixth on the Earth rankings, Su Yan. The Earth rankings of the inner court." Li Xiaoran spoke solemnly by Yi Xian's side. "Brother Yi, there's a ranking in the inner court, the Earth rankings. Anyone who's able to enter the Earth rankings is a genius amongst geniuses. You have to be careful." Yi Xian smiled. "All right." After Su Yan walked in, some of the inner court disciples hurriedly cupped their fists and greeted him. Su Yan smiled and returned the greeting. In the end, he gazed at Yi Xian. "You're that fellow Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian. "We're all from the same sect, yet you actually acted so ruthlessly. You didn't just kill him, you even wiped out his soul and consciousness. Aren't you a little too ruthless?" Yi Xian said, "He asked me to hit him." Su Yan stared at Yi Xian. "Don't play such lowly tricks. You didn't just break the rules of Glittering Jade Pavilion by killing him. You broke the rules of the sect as well. Even if you're able to leave here today, the law enforcers of the sect won't let you go." As he spoke, he gazed at Amo. "Mr. Amo, he openly killed someone in Glittering Jade Pavilion. He doesn't take Glittering Jade Pavilion seriously at all. Could it be that your Glittering Jade Pavilion will just sit idly by and do nothing? If you do, then may I ask Miss Amo, who will still abide by the rules of Glittering Jade Pavilion in the future? Moreover, where will Miss Glittering Jade Pavilion's face go?" Amo's face was slightly gloomy. Suddenly Yi Xian said, "Tisk tsk. You actually joined forces with outsiders to deal with your own." Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly heartbroken. "We're from Great Spirit Palace. We're brothers. Even if there's a conflict between us, it's an internal matter of our Great Spirit Palace. Yet now, you've actually joined forces with Glittering Jade Pavilion to deal with me. Aren't you being a traitor?" Su Yan was speechless. Chapter 1776. Everyone within Glittering Jade Pavilion gazed at Yi Xian, with rather strange expressions on their faces. Isn't this fellow a little too talkative? While Yi Xian seemed to be pestering endlessly, there was actually a certain level of logic behind it. Even though Glittering Jade Pavilion was created by the geniuses of Grand Spirit Palace, it didn't belong to Grand Spirit Palace in the end. At this moment, it was actually inappropriate for Su Yan to ask Glittering Jade Pavilion to deal with Yi Xian. Just as Yi Xian had said, no matter how fierce the internal strife of Grand Spirit Palace was, it was an internal matter, and it shouldn't have joined forces with outsiders. That was actually a huge taboo. Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "I underestimated you." Yi Xian smiled. "Actually, I really don't understand. We're both from Grand Spirit Palace. So why does your inner court look down on the outer court so much?" Su Yan shook his head. "We're not talking about the inner court and outer court right now. We're talking about how you killed Wang Xiao. Even you said that they're both from Grand Spirit Palace. Since it's like that, then why did you kill him?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "Who started it?" Su Yan stared at Yi Xian. "It was just a verbal argument between you, yet you directly killed him. Moreover, it was a surprise attack. Moreover, you acted so ruthlessly, and even wiped out his soul and consciousness. Did you even take him to be a fellow disciple of the same sect? Yi Xian chuckled and said, he targeted me as soon as he arrived. Obviously, he didn't take me to be a fellow disciple of the same sect. Since it's like that, why should I take him to be a fellow disciple? This respect is mutual, isn't it? Su Yan smiled. It's a fact that you killed him. Yi Xian blinked. If that's what you want to say, then I can only say that I killed him. So I killed him. Give me another chance and I'll kill him again. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere here instantly became tense. Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian. Are you declaring war on my inner court? Yi Xian said with a smile. I don't have too many thoughts about the inner court. However, my character is that I will fight whoever comes looking for trouble with me. As he spoke, he walked over to Su Yan. I heard you're the 6th on the Earth rankings. Do you want to spar with me? Because I don't think there's much meaning in a war of words. Challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present here was shocked. An outer sect disciple challenging an inner sect disciple? Furthermore, it was the heaven ascension boundary challenging the absolute space-time boundary. He was challenging a genius on the Earth ranking, who was 2 ranks higher than him. This was a little exaggerated. Su Yan looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in the depths of his eyes. Yi Xian smiled and said, fight? The kind where life and death are decided. Meanwhile, Emo said abruptly, this is Glittering Jade Pavilion. Linling Pavilion. Yi Xian roared with laughter. He glanced at the inner court disciples and smiled. I'm an outer court disciple. If all of you can't stand the sight of me, then feel free to target me. I, Yi Xian, request to be targeted. Please target me. How arrogant. The expressions of the inner court disciples became unsightly. It was an undisguised provocation. Meanwhile, Su Yan suddenly said, I accept your challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone gazed at Su Yan. Actually, they weren't surprised. Su Yan was an inner court disciple, and he was a top-rate expert on the Earth rankings. If he didn't accept Yi Xian's challenge, then how would he continue living in the inner court in the future? After all, Yi Xian wasn't an outer court disciple, and he was only at the Heaven Ascension realm. So he had to accept this challenge. Yi Xian gazed at Su Yan, and the latter smiled. Glittering Jade Pavilion isn't suitable for battle. Let's go somewhere else, alright? Yi Xian nodded. Alright. Su Yan said, let's go to the Starry Sky battlefield. As soon as he finished speaking, a teleportation formation suddenly appeared beneath his and Yi Xian's feet, and then they vanished on the spot. As for the others in Glittering Jade Pavilion, they vanished as well. In the deathly silent starry sky, Yi Xian and Su Yan faced each other from afar. The inner court disciples, and some geniuses and monstrous geniuses, that Glittering Jade Pavilion had invited were standing around them. There were even people from the battle pavilion. The news of their battle spread quickly, so more and more inner court disciples and monstrous geniuses rushed to the starry sky. Miss Imo was there too. A young man followed behind her, and there was a small battle character carved on his left chest. Battle Pavilion. The young man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Is this the Yi Xian who entered the great spiritual god palace through the back door? Imo shook her head slightly. Brother Gushi, you're wrong. With his strength, not to mention being an outer court disciple, he's even qualified to be an inner court disciple. Oh, Gushi was slightly interested. This person dares to challenge a space-time realm cultivator when he's only at the Heaven Ascension realm, so he must be extraordinary. I just don't know how extraordinary he is. Imo smiled. We'll find out soon. In the distance, Su Yan suddenly said, a life and death battle? Yi Xian smiled. Of course. Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian. All right. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Can we begin? Su Yan nodded. He'd just nodded when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss! All the spectators saw a ray of light flash. Su Yan's expression instantly changed drastically, and then he swiftly pressed his palms together. In an instant, a ray of golden light converged in front of him. As soon as he took a step forward, he drew out his sword and slashed. At the instant that his sword slashed, bang! An expanse of light suddenly erupted. Rumble. The spectators watched with astonishment as Elder Chiu was blasted over 10 kilometers away. At the same time, the entire expanse of the starry sky started to be obliterated bit by bit. The spectators in the surroundings were horrified, and they retreated explosively. At this moment, all of them were shocked. No one had expected Yi Xian's attack to be so terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at his hand, and he noticed that it was empty. He'd used the sword drawing technique just now. It was a pure drawing technique, and it wasn't a technique that decided life and death. Even then, his sword hadn't been able to endure the force of the sword drawing technique, because he hadn't used the green profound sword. You. Suddenly, Elder Chiu spoke with astonishment. Your sword technique. At this moment only his soul remained. His physical body had been slashed into pieces by Yi Xian. Suddenly, Yi Xian vanished on the spot. Su Yan's expression changed drastically, and he was about to attack when a sword pierced through the center of his forehead. Bang! Before everyone's eyes, Su Yan was forcefully erased. His soul was obliterated. At this moment, this expanse of the starry sky that was being obliterated fell completely silent. He'd killed him. However, this wasn't the end of it. Yi Xian turned around to gaze at Elder Chiu, and his expression changed drastically. Do you dare to kill the old man? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Why wouldn't I? As he spoke, he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Li Shiran suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he hurriedly stopped Yi Xian. Brother Yi, you absolutely can't kill an elder. Killing an elder is a crime punishable by death. Yi Xian blinked. Is it a huge crime to kill an elder? Li Shiran hurriedly nodded. Extremely. Killing an elder is equivalent to provoking the enforcement hall, and they won't let you off. There's still room for negotiation now. But if you kill an elder, then there'll be no room for negotiation at all. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, But will he take revenge on me in the future? Li Shiran hesitated for a moment and said he might. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this, and then the sword in his hand suddenly started trembling. Li Shiran's expression instantly changed drastically, and he hurriedly said, He might not as well. As he spoke, he gazed at Elder Chiu. Elder Chiu, you won't take revenge on Brother Yi, right? Elder Chiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Would he dare to kill the old man? Even if I gave him 100 guts, he would still. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword. Elder Chiu was instantly annihilated. Li Shiran's face instantly turned pale when he witnessed this scene. We're finished. P.S. I've always had a plan. Chapter 1777. He killed him. The expressions of everyone here had become solemn when they witnessed this scene. As for the inner court disciples, their faces were covered in disbelief. He killed an elder of the inner court. Yi Xian actually dared to kill an elder of the inner court. That was an elder of the inner court. Killing an elder of the inner court wasn't as simple as breaking the rules of the palace. Only the enforcement hall had the authority to deal with an elder who broke the law. However, Yi Xian had bypassed the enforcement hall and killed an elder, so it was equivalent to provoking the enforcement hall and the Great Spirit Palace. Of course, most importantly, Yi Xian had actually been able to kill an elder of the inner court, and he'd done it with such ease. His strength was truly terrifying. Suddenly, a black-clothed old man appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. There was a tiny Ji character inscribed on the old man's left chest. An enforcement officer. Li Shiran's face instantly turned pale when he saw the black-clothed old man. The enforcement officer is here. The black-clothed old man glanced at the spot where Elder Chiu had vanished, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. You killed him? Yi Xian nodded. The black-clothed old man gazed at Yi Xian. Are you coming with me, or do I have to take you with me? Yi Xian smiled. I'm not leaving. The black-clothed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. He opened his palm, and then a black chain suddenly appeared in his palm. In the next moment, the black chain flew forward. Hiss! The sound of something tearing resounded. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed with his sword. Bang! An expanse of light suddenly erupted. In the next moment, the black-clothed old man was pushed over 3 kilometers back. and he just stopped when the chain in his hand shattered into pieces. Everyone was stunned once more. Even the enforcement elder isn't a match for him? The black-clothed old man was quite stunned. I was actually pushed back by that attack. Yi Xian gazed at the black-clothed old man. You might not be able to take me with you. The black-clothed old man spoke furiously. How dare you? Are you trying to rebel? You. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. He then slowly walked towards the black-robed old man. Boom. A powerful sword aura enveloped the black-robed old man. The black-clothed old man's expression changed drastically. The man in front of him wanted to kill him. Right at this moment, Elder Gu Qing suddenly appeared before Yi Xian, and Gu Qing hurriedly said, Don't act recklessly. In fact, he was also very shocked at this moment. He knew that Yi Xian had been concealing his strength, but he never expected Yi Xian's strength to be so terrifying. Not only did he kill Su Yan of the Earth Roll, but he also killed an inner elder. Even the law enforcement elder was no match for him. This was too terrifying. Yi Xian said indifferently, I'll kill anyone who dares to humiliate me and my outer disciple. Yanli stared at Yi Xian. There are many disciples who humiliated you. Not only are there many inner disciples, but there are also some true disciples. Why? Are you going to kill them all? Yi Xian looked Yanli in the eye. Kill. If an inner disciple humiliates my outer disciple, I'll kill him. If a true disciple humiliates my outer disciple, I'll kill him. At Yi Xian's words, a lady in a purple dress suddenly laughed. This guy is extraordinarily smart. His words have elevated the grudge between the two of them to the inner and outer sect. He has always admitted that he is a disciple of the great spiritual god Palace. In this case, it is an internal matter. With his talent and battle prowess, the higher-ups will definitely cherish him. He should not die. There was a man next to the lady in purple dress. The man glanced at Yi Xian without saying a word. The lady in purple dress looked at the man next to her. Brother Yaoya, can you see through him? Li Yaoya. This man was the most monstrous genius in the history of the great spiritual palace. Li Yaoya shook his head. I can't. Then he looked at the lady. Miss Linlang, can you see through him? Xiao Linlang shook her head and smiled. I can't. This guy is interesting. Do you think the enforcement hall will take him away? Li Yaoya looked at Yanli. I'm afraid Elder Yin can't take him away. Xiao Linlang smirked. Why? Li Yaoya said plainly. Intuition. Xiao Linlang was stunned then laughed. What a good intuition. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said with a smile. After all these years, an interesting guy has finally appeared. In the distance, Yanli stared at Yi Xian. What if I humiliate your outer sect? Are you going to kill me too? Yi Xian pointed his sword at Yanli and laughed. Kill? Why not? Not just you. I will kill anyone who humiliates the outer sect and the great spiritual palace. Even if he's above the sage level, I will still kill him. Yanli looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. On the other side, Xiao Linlang suddenly shook her head and smiled. This guy is really interesting. He directly escalated the feud between the inner and outer sect to the great spiritual palace. Now, it seems like he killed to protect the great spiritual palace. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at Yanli. Are you going to humiliate the great spiritual palace? How dare you insult my great spiritual god palace? Yi Xian, swear that I will not rest until you die. Everyone. Yanli was a little confused. When did I humiliate the great spiritual palace? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.